The story begins with the protagonist completely locked in, sweating away in a virtual reality game like a dedicated Discord moderator who hasn't seen the sun in a decade. For this certified couch potato, the digital world is the entire universe, and his only personality trait is leveling up his character. After sacrificing his entire youth, posture, and social life to the grind, he finally arrives at his ultimate main character moment, standing right on the edge of becoming the most overpowered entity in the lobby. With the kind of unhinged focus usually reserved for typing paragraphs in comment sections, he unleashes his ultimate secret move, the legendary Phoenix Fist, hitting the boss monster with a strike so violently frame-perfect it manifests a literal black flash, which instantly vaporizes the boss monster into literal pixels. The surrounding players are left absolutely flabbergasted, witnessing a mythical creature that had wiped out entire teams get effortlessly deleted by a guy using nothing but his bare hands. He flexes to the remaining lobby that this is the world of a virtual reality game where he has built an untouchable reputation as an absolute legend. He intentionally chose to fight using nothing but his fists, a weapon category universally mocked as a joke by the entire community, just so he could brag about overcoming the game through pure, toxic dedication. Right before the game's servers are permanently shut down by the developers, he accomplishes his life's purpose of defeating every single boss in existence, prompting him to finally log out and rip the greasy headset off his face while thinking that he made it just in time. However, the moment reality loads back in, his legendary power completely vanishes, leaving him to face the tragic realization that his actual physical body is incredibly weak. Having neglected basic human survival by refusing to eat a single proper meal for 2 whole weeks, he genuinely wonders if he is about to die right there in his chair, yet he feels absolutely no regrets because he believes he achieved peak gamer status. Suddenly, the peaceful embrace of his imminent doom is interrupted by a woman aggressively shaking him awake, as if she were trying to restart a broken lawnmower. Still completely confused and lacking any brain cells, he hears her barking orders at him to hurry up and get ready for the day before he misses his chance. He blinks his eyes and looks around the room, totally clueless as to why his expensive gaming setup has been replaced by generic wooden furniture, until the booming voice of his father echoes through the hallway, calling him Kazuya. Absolute panic instantly sets in as he realizes he is trapped inside his parents' house, a place he successfully escaped a whole decade ago. He looks down at his own hands, expecting 30-year-old calluses, but instead freezes in utter horror upon realizing that he has been hit with a massive reverse-aging nerf, looking exactly like an awkward, broke teenager. Right at that precise moment, the television screen in the living room begins broadcasting a breaking news report concerning a sudden monster outbreak in the local area. His father instantly grows incredibly uneasy, pacing around like a nervous character, but his mother casually waves it off with total chill, reassuring him that the situation will be easily taken care of by the local Adventurers Guild. Kazuya stands there looking like a confused anime character, with question marks hovering over his head, listening to the reporter explain that a massive creature has appeared, specifically an evil boar classified as a large-type absolute unit. Kazuya is completely stunned to learn that literal monsters are casually roaming around his actual neighborhood, prompting him to retreat back to his bedroom so he can try to process this bizarre reality check. While rummaging through his desk, he stumbles upon a school pamphlet that causes his brain to completely short-circuit the more he reads through its pages. It turns out that in this bizarre parallel universe, teenagers do not study math or history, but instead attend specialized schools to learn the fine art of jumping monsters in the streets, and he is apparently scheduled to enroll in one immediately. Despite having a million questions about how he accidentally traveled back in time to an alternate dimension, one fact remains absolutely certain to him, which was that he knows exactly how to throw hands. He convinces himself that no matter what obstacles stand in his path, he will simply choose the fist weapon category once again, rise to the position of the ultimate fist king, and dominate this new world just like a hidden boss. With his delusions fully restored, he grabs his smartphone to scroll through the internet for some much-needed knowledge about his new life. He discovers that the institution in question is actually a middle school and that his unathletic self has been assigned to the generic swordsman course. Intrigued by the skills, he scrolls down to inspect the official curriculum, only to discover that the academy spends 3 whole years teaching students basic skills like sword bash level 5 and fire arrow level 5. He is utterly appalled by this information, recognizing these exact abilities as bottom-tier, beginner-level trash from his old game that any decent player could max out during a casual weekend tutorial. The realization that society spends 36 months mastering literal starter skills completely ruins his mood, making him wonder what the point of such agonizingly slow progress even is when they could just watch a guide on YouTube. He then wonders if he can access his personal screen to check his base stats, recalling that back in his gaming days, he would simply mutter the word status to summon a floating neon menu. Waiting with anticipation, he stands in the center of his bedroom and begins screaming the word status at the top of his lungs like a crazy person trying to activate a voice command fridge, repeating it over and over until his mother yells through the wall for him to shut up. Embarrassed but desperate, he walks out and asks her if she possesses any hidden knowledge regarding his current stats or character build. Instead of providing an ancient secret, she simply hands him a crumpled piece of paper known as a skill sheet, assuming that this is the mandatory paperwork he is making a scene about for the upcoming freshman entrance ceremony. He flattens the paper out, takes one look at his character sheet, and is left completely speechless by the absolute tragedy printed before his eyes. His weapon proficiency stats are practically in the negatives, and his solitary active ability is a generic, low-tier stamina recovery move that belongs on a background villager. A massive wave of panic sets in as he stares at his garbage stats, genuinely questioning if he will even pass the test to get accepted into a literal middle school. His father then strolls into the room to offer some boomer wisdom, explaining that attending classes will naturally help him unlock more skills over time. But to Kazuya, the entire situation feels completely hopeless. Even if this world operates on the exact same game mechanics he mastered in his bedroom, his current base stats are painfully weak, making his dreams of becoming the ultimate fist king feel further away than a father who went to buy milk. At this pathetic power level, he cannot even hope to defeat a basic level 1 tutorial monster, let alone challenge the high-level bosses of this world, leading him to doubt if he can ever truly become a top-tier player. His father looks at his depressed posture with a mixture of confusion and pity, telling him that accepting one's own weakness is actually the very first step toward becoming a true champion. He reassures his son that his progress will only go up from here, prompting Kazuya to thank his father for the sudden motivational speech and vow that he will eventually become absolutely crazy strong. His father then suggests that if he is truly serious about changing his destiny, he should probably go touch some grass at the local training hall starting tomorrow morning. The very next day, Kazuya arrives at the local training grounds absolutely beaming with the hyperactive energy of a gamer who has just discovered a new glitch. The resident gym instructor informs him that all training weapons are completely free of charge for kids under the age of 15, though he notes that a standard swordsman build is strictly limited to learning sword-type abilities. However, as Kazuya inspects his official skill sheet, his sharp eyes notice an absolute error in the system that should have been mechanically impossible. His sheet lists a variety of gun-related abilities among the unlockables, proving that while arbitrary job classes exist to keep the casual players happy, there are actually zero hard restrictions on what skills a person can acquire adjusting his imaginary glasses, as he mutters, all according to plan, thinking he is Light Yagami or some shit. Realizing that he can build a hybrid character, he decides that the very first ability he needs to rush down is the physical ability boost passive to increase his overall strength. He immediately initiates a brutal, unhinged training routine, beating a wooden log continuously for 8 hours straight, while spamming a basic heal spell every single time his soft hands start to blister and bleed. Complete physical exhaustion hits him like a truck, but he notices with absolute joy that the bleeding has successfully stopped, and that his mastery over the heal spell has finally leveled up. The skin on his battered knuckles begins to grow back in real time, and even though his hands still look slightly ruined, he feels like he has successfully broken past his human limits through pure, toxic dedication. However, his overall magic pool is still incredibly small, and he has yet to successfully unlock the physical ability boost he desperately desires. The local gym regulars and instructors quickly start to notice this strange teenager who keeps returning to the venue day after day, violently attacking a wooden log with a blunt weapon without taking a single water break. One of the trainers remarks to his colleague that the kid has been grinding for 8 hours every single day, as if he were possessed by a literal demon or trying to escape a ban wave. By the end of the week, Kazuya becomes absolutely certain that this reality uses the exact same mechanics as his favorite video game, meaning his years of being a basement-dwelling player can finally be utilized as legitimate real-world knowledge. Eventually, his insane grinding pays off as he finally unlocks the physical ability boost, allowing him to swing a heavy mace at maximum speed for a full hour without his arms falling off. Setting his sights on the next milestone, he decides his new objective is to force his mace proficiency stat all the way to level 10 through sheer, repetitive violence. While he is busy treating the wooden log like it owes him money, he notices a young girl and her father watching his bizarre display from a safe distance. The girl loudly complains to her dad that her father does nothing but play video games all day, while Kazuya, who is growing incredibly bored of swinging his weapon in a straight line, decides to use his mace to try and carve the log into a beautiful anime sculpture instead. The girl openly labels him a complete weirdo, but her father finds his choice of a blunt weapon incredibly cool, pointing out that the boy is practicing with an elite level of intensity. The girl assumes that Kazuya is just trolling and fooling around, but her father strongly disagrees, stating that those are the unhinged, focused eyes of a true grinder who will inevitably become overpowered because he does not care about the opinions of casual onlookers. Kazuya attempts to show off by executing another massive swing, but he completely loses his balance and wipes out, failing the move entirely. Another week of intense practice passes by, and right when he is about to put the finishing touches on his wooden masterpiece, the log violently shatters into a million useless splinters. Utterly defeated, Kazuya throws a massive, toddler-tier tantrum in the middle of the gym, screaming at the sky about why the physics in this world are so incredibly difficult to master. He begins to desperately doubt whether his hidden stats are even going up at all, even though he has to admit that swinging the massive mace now requires barely any physical effort. The same girl notices him losing his mind once again, as he openly wishes that he could just press a button to check his stats, before he abruptly decides to change up his training method entirely. Suddenly, the slick log slips completely out of his sweaty grip and goes flying directly toward the unsuspecting girl like a heat-seeking missile. He tries to scream a warning at her, but the projectile is moving far too fast for a normal human to dodge, forcing him to act purely on instinct. Without a single thought in his empty head, he dashes forward with incredible speed and absolutely shatters the flying log in midair with a perfectly timed strike, leaving the girl completely stunned by the sudden display of main character energy. In that exact moment, a realization washes over him as he realizes he has just successfully triggered the active skill known as bash, proving that his weapon proficiency has indeed leveled up behind the scenes, and that his hours of looking like a maniac have not been a waste of time. He turns to her and casually asks if she survived the encounter, but she just stares at him blankly and states that he is the most eccentric person she has ever met. Later on, the two of them sit down to enjoy a drink and get to know each other without any flying timber interrupting the conversation. The girl learns that he is scheduled to start his very first year of middle school this coming April, prompting her to introduce herself as Karen Tanya, while casually dropping the massive flex that she is actually a third-year student at the exact same academy. Kazuya offers his gratitude for the free beverage, to which she replies that if he ever finds himself getting bullied or lost in the hallways, he could simply come find her for protection. She openly admits that she has been dying to strike up a conversation with him for a long time, leaving him entirely perplexed, until she explains that his daily routine of turning a training log into sawdust has made him a legendary meme among the locals. She points out that unlocking a high-tier active skill like Bash before even stepping foot inside a middle school classroom is an absolute speedrun tactic. He casually shrugs it off and states that he had literally just learned the move 5 minutes ago, an admission that causes her jaw to hit the floor in absolute disbelief. She notes that a normal student usually requires 3 agonizing years of academic lectures just to master that exact same strike, viewing his rapid progress as definitive proof that he is a hardworking genius who inspires her to start taking her own training seriously. Kazuya, completely ignoring the compliments, immediately brings up a highly practical broke boy concern, asking her if she knows of any secret maps or farming locations where he can swing his mace for free. Up until this point, he had been blowing his entire childhood allowance on buying replacement logs from the shop, and the financial toll of his grind set is finally about to bankrupt his bank account. Tanya laughs and agrees that while an individual log seems cheap, the microtransactions of buying them in bulk will absolutely ruin anyone's finances over time. He solemnly admits that he is already completely broke, and that if he cannot find a free-to-play training method, his entire character progress will grind to a permanent halt. She smiles and suggests that it was time for him to stop attacking inanimate objects and start hunting actual monsters, informing him about a low-level slime forest located in the neighboring town. Since he can already execute a high-damage bash attack, she reasoned that he should easily be able to solo the starter enemies without any issue. The mere mention of farming monsters instantly triggers his dormant gaming instincts, filling him with intense excitement because hunting low-tier monsters is something he used to do for 14 hours a day in his past life. Before he dashes off to the location, she gives him a serious high-level warning, stating that if he wanders too deep into the uncharted zones of the woods, he will get absolutely wrecked by a high-mobility monster known as a horned rabbit. The perspective then shifts to the slime forest, where Kazuya can be seen absolutely farming the local wildlife while enjoying the experience like a kid in a candy store. This is the authentic gaming experience he has been craving, allowing him to gain real-time combat mastery, level up his hidden attributes, and secure a steady stream of passive income all at the same time. After 3 hours of non-stop slime genocide, physical fatigue finally starts to weigh him down, but he manages to fill his inventory with a massive haul of monster drops. Deciding that this initial raid is merely a scouting mission, he resolves to head back to town while making a mental note that he desperately needs to purchase a larger backpack to maximize his farming efficiency next time. Right as he turns to leave, a terrifying, high-frequency rattling sound echoes from the bushes directly behind him, and a wild horned rabbit suddenly spawns into the clearing. He immediately curses his own greed for wandering too far past the safe zone as the aggressive creature locks eyes with him and charges forward like an unhinged anime antagonist. Kazuya cracks his knuckles and smirks, confidently thinking to himself, "Nah, I'd win. Alright, you are not Gojo lil bro." He tries to wind up his signature bash attack, but the rabbit's movement speed is completely broken, darting across the grass like a TikTok video playing at double speed. The creature's agility is on an entirely different tier of power, rendering his slow, vertical overhead swings completely useless against its erratic pathing. Adjusting his inputs like a pro player, he quickly switches to a wide horizontal swing, managing to successfully connect his mace with the rabbit's face, but the attack does absolutely zero damage to its health bar. To make matters worse, he notices a massive durability warning on his weapon, which has cracked upon making contact with the rabbit's ironclad skull. The monster lunges through the air once again, and Kazuya realizes with absolute horror that his human reaction time is far too slow to parry the incoming attack. He takes a direct, devastating hit to the chest that sends him flying into the dirt, causing the harsh reality of his situation to finally smash through his thick skull. This is not a cozy virtual reality game where he can simply respawn at the nearest checkpoint. This is real life, and his actual health bar is flashing red. He frantically spammed his low-level heal spell to patch up his wounds, realizing that even a generic starter monster in this world can easily delete him if it possesses a higher speed stat. Forcing his racing heart to calm down, he decides to stop rushing, bait the rabbit into close-quarters combat, and wait patiently for the enemy to lock itself into an attack animation. The exact moment the creature jumps, exposing a critical opening, Kazuya unleashes every ounce of his remaining stamina into a desperate bash attack. The blow connects perfectly, landing as a massive critical hit that sends the rabbit crashing to the ground, completely defeated. Breathing heavily and covered in sweat, he muttered that he had somehow survived the encounter, knowing that if his timing had been off by even a single fraction of a second, he would have been sent straight to the afterlife. The reality of the situation finally sinks into his brain, forcing him to realize that while this world utilizes video game logic, a single mistake means permanent death, meaning he will have to completely abandon his arrogant gamer mindset if he wants to survive. He picks up the heavy carcass of the defeated horned rabbit, remembering Tanya's helpful advice that he could exchange high-tier monster drops for actual cash at the local ward office. For the entirety of the following week, he transforms into an absolute ghost of the slime forest, farming the zone from sunrise to sunset without a single moment of rest. By ruthlessly selling every single piece of loot he stripped from the monsters, he managed to secure a whopping 100,000 yen in just 7 days of pure grinding. Compared to the mind-numbing boredom of hitting a wooden log in a gym, exterminating actual monsters feels infinitely more dopamine-inducing and financially rewarding. Flush with cash, he sets his sights on purchasing a premium skill sheet of his very own, a high-tech item that would allow him to inspect his hidden stats and attributes from the comfort of his own bedroom without any paperwork. Upon arriving at the ward office, the beautiful receptionist offers him a deep bow, thanking him profusely for his incredible service to the community before handing over the magic sheet and instructing him to place a single drop of blood on the surface to initialize the display. He politely thanked her for the smooth transaction, but she insisted that the guild was the party that owed him a massive debt of gratitude for his service. She explained that the materials he had been casually bringing in over the past 2 weeks were incredibly rare and valuable, noting that the office had never once witnessed a literal child deliver 20 kilograms of premium slime cores every single day. Thanks to his obsessive sweatlord behavior, Kazuya had accidentally transformed himself into a local cryptid and a legendary celebrity among the office staff. Right at that exact moment of peak glory, his actual parents suddenly walked through the front doors of the building, causing him to freeze in absolute terror like a teenager who had just been caught doing something illegal. They marched right up to his face, with his father immediately demanding to know why on earth his underage son was hanging around a shady monster-pawning facility instead of doing his homework. Kazuya opened his mouth to stammer out a lame excuse, but his father cut him off entirely, mentioning that a wild rumor had been circulating town about a mysterious kid who was single-handedly crashing the local slime core economy with massive item drops. Curious about the gossip, the father had decided to investigate the claims himself, which was how he ended up catching his own son red-handed at the front desk. He glared down at Kazuya, demanding to know the truth about where an unathletic gamer had managed to acquire a massive sack of high-grade monster parts. Kazuya looked his dad dead in the eye and stated that he had personally soloed every single one of those monsters through pure skill. His father's expression instantly hardened into pure disappointment, telling him to stop making up delusional anime fantasies, because everyone knew Kazuya was far too weak and fragile to survive a single encounter with a wild beast. A cold wave of fear and childhood trauma crept into Kazuya's mind, causing him to take a defensive step backward away from his family. His father reached out a hand to grab his shoulder and demand compliance, but Kazuya violently pulled away, stating that if his own parents were going to permanently view him as a useless loser without even listening to his side of the story, then there was absolutely no point in wasting his breath. He turned around and stormed off, thinking to himself that despite being completely reborn into a magical fantasy universe with game mechanics, his family dynamic was still exactly as toxic as it was in his past life, leaving him to wonder if he had truly changed at all as a person. Shortly after his dramatic family fallout, the time arrived for him to prepare for the official middle school entrance ceremony, leaving him with one final task, which was to finally activate the premium skill sheet he had purchased with his hard-earned slime money. Once the bloody appraisal process finished loading, the floating text confirmed exactly what his Galaxy Brain gamer theories had predicted all along. It had not taken him 3 years of boring classroom lectures to unlock those active abilities, because in this world, skill acquisition was directly tied to grinding weapon proficiency through repetitive physical actions. He could not comprehend how an entire society of civilized human beings had failed to notice such a blatant, base game mechanic. But this discovery definitive proved that his years of wasting away in MMORPG lobbies could be used as a literal cheat code in this reality. This meant that scaling his stats to the level of the ultimate Fist King was not a distant fantasy, and that he could finally use his overwhelming power to force his stubborn father to acknowledge his worth. With a renewed sense of main character energy, he resolved to keep quietly expanding his character build step by step until he was completely unstoppable. The morning of the grand entrance ceremony finally arrived, and Kazuya found himself getting annoyed by his mother, loudly asking her what she planned to do with the 50 identical photos she was currently snapping of him on her phone. She flashed a maternal smile and told him that this was his big day as a rising freshman, meaning she needed to capture every single angle for her social media feed. He let out a massive, defeated sigh and looked up at the campus, noting that the academy looked less like a middle school and more like a massive, high-security fortress designed to survive an apocalypse. His mother then brought up the dramatic argument from the previous afternoon, explaining that his father was not actually trying to be a hater, but was simply worried that his son was getting involved in some dangerous, underground black market monster dealing. He muttered a completely half-hearted response just as the school bells began to chime, signaling the official start of the opening ceremony. The crowd went silent as Karen Tanya elegantly stepped up to the podium to deliver the welcoming address to the incoming freshman class, revealing to the entire stadium that she was actually the reigning student council president. Kazuya's eyes practically popped out of his head as he realized that the casual third-year girl who had promised to protect him from bullies was actually the most politically powerful student on campus. He noticed that her entire aura had completely shifted, looking incredibly majestic, composed, and professional compared to the casual girl who had watched him fail an overhead mace swing at the gym. She continued her speech with absolute eloquence, explaining to the freshmen that the next 3 years of their lives would be filled with brutal trials, dangerous dungeons, and terrifying monsters. She proclaimed that by forming parties, supporting their classmates, and embracing the power of friendship, they could collectively level up and overcome any obstacle in their path. She passionately urged them never to surrender to despair so they could graduate as elite, high-tier adventurers, expressing her ultimate hope that their class would one day grow strong enough to protect the entire nation from destruction. The moment she concluded her speech, the entire auditorium erupted into a massive wave of applause, leaving Kazuya genuinely impressed by her leadership skills. Suddenly, the inspiring atmosphere was completely ruined as the principal, a massive, intimidating man named Todoroki, violently took over the stage like a final boss entering the arena. He flashed a menacing grin at the crowd, introducing himself before casually asking the freshman class if they were all familiar with the academy's traditional skill appraisal system. Kazuya was caught completely off guard when the principal announced that the school had hired a full-time, high-level professional appraiser just to audit the students' hidden stats on live television. He introduced a solemn-looking man named Yujihara, who offered a polite bow to the crowd while looking like a man who desperately wanted to go home. The principal then flashed a highly punchable smirk and made a shocking announcement, stating that any incoming freshmen who felt like they were absolute prodigies should step up to the stage right now for a special, live appraisal session in front of the entire student body. The upperclassmen sitting in the back rows let out a collective, synchronized groan, immediately recognizing this stunt as the school's traditional method of publicly hazing overconfident freshmen to ruin their self-esteem. Without warning, the principal extended a finger and pointed directly into the crowd at a random, trembling student, leaving the poor kid looking completely terrified. Standing right beside the target, Kazuya decided that this was the perfect opportunity to flex his hidden stats, stepping forward onto the stage and casually asking the faculty if he could borrow a training weapon to demonstrate his build. The principal let out a loud, mocking laugh and granted permission, while down in the crowd, both Kazuya's mother and Tanya looked like they were about to have a collective heart attack from shock. Yujihara leaned in and offered a quiet apology to the teenager, explaining that the principal was just a toxic boomer who liked to scare the new kids to motivate them. Kazuya casually told him not to worry about it, stating that he was honestly just curious to see if his expensive, blood-activated skill sheet matched the official school hardware. Taking a deep breath, Kazuya centered his stance, closed his eyes, and unleashed the full magnitude of his hidden power, causing a massive pressure wave to ripple through the entire auditorium. Yujihara completely froze in place, his appraisal tools slipping from his fingers as the entire stadium fell into a dead, suffocating silence. The principal burst out laughing, loudly praising the boy's confidence and declaring that Kazuya would become an internet celebrity by tomorrow morning for his bravery. He then turned to Yujihara and casually apologized for wasting his time, remarking that the kid's aura was probably just a cheap illusion and that he was clearly still an inexperienced amateur. Still trembling with absolute shock, Yujihara stared at the readout screen and revealed to the entire audience that Kazuya actually possessed the active skill bash at level 2. The principal's smug smile instantly vanished from his face, leaving him visibly shaken because it was mechanically impossible for a kid who had just graduated elementary school to possess an active combat skill. Before anyone's brain could fully process the absolute glitch they were witnessing, Kazuya decided to double down on the flex, activating his active heal spell right on stage and causing a bright holy light to illuminate the dark auditorium, leaving Yujihara even more utterly flabbergasted. With the absolute calmness of a pro player smurfing in a bronze lobby, Kazuya casually stated to the faculty that he wasn't even close to being done showing off his build. The principal grew incredibly irritated and red-faced, raising his voice to bark that children should know their place and listen to their superiors instead of trolling on stage. Completely ignoring the authority figure like a true Chad, Kazuya pushed his inputs to the absolute limit, activating a high-tier magical attack buff that enveloped his entire body in a glowing aura of pure energy. The entire crowd absolutely erupted into a chaotic frenzy of screams and whispers, with students clutching their heads in disbelief, as the entire hierarchy of the school was demolished in real time. Everyone in the stadium began to desperately ask the exact same question, wondering what kind of cosmic anomaly this kid was, considering he possessed a high-level bash, a professional-grade heal, and a rare magical buff all before attending a single class. Completely overwhelmed by the situation, Yujihara politely escorted Kazuya into a private backstage room for further evaluation, admitting that in his entire career as a professional appraiser, he had never once encountered a child who had managed to unlock three active skills simultaneously. Kazuya waved to Tanya as she walked in, offering his thanks for her support, to which she replied that she was just glad he hadn't broken the stage equipment. She noted that the principal was currently trapped outside, desperately fighting for his life against a massive mob of angry parents who were demanding to know why a random kid was flexing boss-tier magic during a middle school assembly. Tanya wondered if Kazuya had secret tutorial access, and Yujihara agreed, noting that half the faculty believed the boy had been illegally homeschooled by an S-rank adventurer. Kazuya's mother listened to the conversation with absolute pride as Yujihara dropped an even larger bombshell, revealing that upon closer inspection of the official data, Kazuya's bash skill was actually maxed out at level 10. Kazuya raised an eyebrow in confusion, pointing out that the appraiser had literally just told the entire stadium that his skill was only at level 2 a few minutes ago. Yujihara cleared his throat and clarified that the discrepancy was due to his low base weapon proficiency at the start of the test. The skill's true output had been heavily throttled by his garbage stats, but now that his club mastery attribute had successfully reached level 10 through his unhinged log-beating routine, he could officially fire off the bash skill at 100% of its maximum damage potential. Kazuya nodded to himself, reflecting on how this world's coding operated exactly like a classic RPG where skill scaling was hard-capped by weapon stats. He then brought up the principal's earlier announcement, recalling that students who possessed high-level combat skills had the legal right to skip the academy entirely through a special exemption clause. He looked the faculty dead in the eye and stated his definitive intention to take that exact path, revealing that he had zero interest in sitting through 3 years of boring middle school classes, because his only goal was to speedrun his character progression as fast as humanly possible. His mother tried to frantically intervene, begging him to just be a normal kid and make some friends, but he completely ignored her pleas, stating that he needed to acquire absolute strength so he could solo any boss monster in the world without relying on a party. Yujihara let out a heavy sigh, pointing out that no matter how cracked a player's build was, nobody could truly survive the in-game content entirely alone. He acknowledged that Kazuya's work ethic and raw talent were absolutely unhinged, but emphasized that attending classes would allow him to meet high-level party members and develop his social skills. His mother quickly wrapped up the meeting, stating that they would officially discuss the legalities of the school exemption with the principal tomorrow before heading back home, while reminding Kazuya to be incredibly careful on his walk back. Yujihara bid the boy farewell, suggesting that they should probably have a serious family meeting with his father the moment they stepped through the front door. Tanya then slowly approached Kazuya in the hallway, looking slightly nervous as she asked him if he wanted to walk home together since they lived in the same neighborhood. On the way down the suburban streets, Kazuya offered a sincere apology for completely ruining her peaceful opening ceremony with his unhinged stat flexing. She admitted that she was genuinely shocked when she heard him announce his plans to drop out of school on his very first day, prompting him to confess that he was still weighing his options with his parents. However, he reiterated his stance that sitting in a classroom for 3 years felt like a massive waste of exp, especially since his current power level was so pathetic that he almost got deleted by a single horned rabbit last week. He argued that the entire school curriculum was designed for casuals, pointing out that if the average student stopped complaining and simply grinded a wooden log for 8 hours a day for a single month, they could easily master the entire syllabus before finals. Tanya abruptly stopped walking, interrupting his rant to explain that not every human being possessed the terrifying, borderline psychotic level of dedication required to do that. She noted that the average teenager had a life, hobbies, and a fragile mental state, meaning they needed those 3 years of steady pacing just to safely unlock a single skill without hurting themselves. She acknowledged that his work ethic was completely built different, but told him that he couldn't expect the rest of society to match the toxic grinding habits of a sweatlord. Kazuya stared at her face, realizing with a sudden pang of guilt that his arrogant, elitist gamer comments had deeply hurt her feelings as an academic overachiever. She quickly looked away and offered a polite apology for snapping at him, stating that she hoped to see him in class tomorrow before running off toward her house. The moment Kazuya stepped foot inside his living room, his father tossed the official school report onto the table, aggressively questioning whether this ridiculous skill sheet actually belonged to his son. Kazuya nodded calmly, confirming that he had purchased the document using the cold, hard cash he earned from his solo slime farming expeditions. His father stared at him with intense skepticism, asking him one final time if the wild stories about him vaporizing logs and casting holy magic were actually true. Kazuya crossed his arms, challenging his old man by asking if he finally believed in his son's power, but his father let out a defeated sigh and admitted that he still could not bring himself to accept it. He argued that a kid unlocking 3 high-tier combat skills in the span of a single month defied the absolute laws of human nature. Kazuya threw his hands up in frustration, recounting the entire agonizing process of hitting a wooden log for 8 hours every single day until his knuckles turned to jelly. His father rubbed his temples, expressing deep parental concern over the fact that his son had suddenly stopped playing video games, started brutally murdering slimes, and was now acting like a completely different person, leading him to wonder if the skill sheet was an elaborate forgery. Kazuya scoffed, asking his dad if he was honestly accusing him of printing fake stats just to look cool on the internet. His father apologized for his harsh skepticism, stating that as an adventurer himself, he needed to see his son's combat capabilities with his own 2 eyes before he could truly believe the hype. Kazuya agreed to the challenge without a single moment of hesitation, prompting the two of them to pack their gear and head straight to the high-level gate of the Izukogen field. At the security checkpoint, the armored guards meticulously scanned their identification cards to verify their clearance levels. Kazuya poked his dad's shoulder, asking about the legal purpose of the cards, to which his father informed him that the license was a formal graduation certificate from an elite adventurer academy. He explained that hunting dangerous monsters in high-level zones strictly required at least one certified, licensed professional in the party, which was the legal reason why amateur children were banned from solo farming slimes without adult supervision. Kazuya was completely stunned to find out he had been casually breaking the law for the past 2 weeks, sweating profusely as he promised to be on his best behavior from now on. The moment the massive steel security gates began to slowly hiss open, a massive, unhinged smile spread across Kazuya's face as he stared at the high-level hunting grounds, realizing that his exp gains were about to absolutely skyrocket. Upon entering the dense forest, his mother tapped her husband's shoulder, reminding him that both of them needed to put on their heavy tactical gear before moving any further into the brush. Kazuya stared at his parents in absolute shock, having never expected his mundane, ordinary parents to secretly possess high-level endgame equipment. He looked down at his own basic setup, realizing that if he played his cards right, he could use his parents as meat shields to level up his character build at Mach speed. His father asked him if his current weapon loadout was ready, specifically inquiring if he felt comfortable wielding a standard training sword instead of his usual blunt mace. Kazuya completely froze in place, staring at his parents who now looked like high-tier raid bosses covered in glowing armor, glowing swords, and high-caliber firearms. His father noted that proper defensive scaling was absolutely essential in real combat, explaining that while modern gun builds were the current meta for clearing dungeons, he wanted to see what his son could accomplish using nothing but a classic, low-tier blade. They began venturing deep into the shadowy woods, with his father constantly barking orders at him to keep his guard up and mask his presence from the local predators. The father instructed him that if they encountered an enemy mob, Kazuya needed to immediately dive into the bushes, hide his power level, and wait for the creature to lower its guard before executing a single stealth attack. Just as Kazuya was about to respond, his sharp gamer senses picked up the faint audio cue of multiple heavy footsteps rapidly approaching their position from the rear. Within seconds, 4 massive, snarling direwolves materialized from the shadows, causing the overall tension in the air to skyrocket. His father frantically readied his firearm, but the wolves were moving with incredible velocity, dodging left and right like agile anime characters. Ignoring all safety protocols, Kazuya dashed forward into the danger zone, charging directly at the pack of monsters with the unhinged energy of a player trying to force level his sword proficiency stat. Closing the distance in a single frame, he executed a flawless high-speed vertical slash that completely cut down the lead wolf in a single hit, causing his father to freeze in absolute slack-jawed shock. Kazuya flashed a cocky grin at the remaining 3 wolves, loudly taunting their terrible AI and mocking their speed stats as he spun his sword around. The wild beasts immediately recognized him as the primary threat, shifting their aggro entirely onto him as the casual stroll transformed into a brutal fight for survival. The skirmish ended almost instantly, as Kazuya executed a series of flawless, high-damage standard attacks that turned the remaining wolves into literal loot drops. As he wiped the sweat from his forehead and tried to catch his breath, The ground beneath them began to violently shake as a massive horde of screeching mandragoras erupted from the soil. His father frantically screamed at him to fall back and retreat, explaining that these specific mobs possessed a unique call ability that would summon endless reinforcements if they weren't wiped out instantly. However, Kazuya completely ignored the warning, immediately activating his physical ability Boost Magic and leaping directly into the center of the monster wave like a madman. Moving with absolute precision and frame-perfect agility, he began slicing through the plants one by one before they could even finish their spawn animations. His father could barely believe his own eyes, watching his scrawny son move like an absolute god-tier esports player. Kazuya laughed to himself, recalling his deep game knowledge which taught him that spawn-killing mobs before they fully emerged was the ultimate strategy, and that 2 quick hits with a bash skill were more than enough to delete their entire health bars. Suddenly, a massive shadow fell over the clearing as a colossal, threat-level grizzly bear emerged from the deep brush, letting out a roar that shook the trees. His father completely froze in place, his face turning pale as he wondered how on earth an endgame boss monster had managed to spawn in a low-level training zone. The giant beast lunged forward with terrifying speed, and Kazuya, realizing his parents were in the splash zone, intentionally stepped into the attack path to draw the aggro. The massive bear violently swiped its claws, launching Kazuya high into the air before opening its giant jaws and swallowing the teenager whole right in front of his horrified parents' eyes. His mother let out a blood-curdling scream, believing her son had just been permanently deleted from existence. And this is how the manga ends. Thanks for watching, yeah, no. In the very next second, a massive glowing beam of energy violently sliced through the grizzly's stomach from the inside out. Kazuya burst through the monster's chest cavity in an explosion of pixels and bare guts, landing perfectly on his feet like a seasoned anime protagonist who had just executed a classic trope. Covered in monster residue but completely unfazed, he quickly spammed his high-level heal spell to restore his health bar to full, turning around to check if his crying parents had taken any collateral damage. Flashing a small, incredibly smug smile at his stunned father, Kazuya casually asked him if he finally had enough video evidence to admit that his son was officially cracked. His mother rushed forward at maximum speed, violently tackling him into a massive hug while sobbing tears of pure relief, leaving Kazuya looking completely puzzled by her intense emotional reaction. His father walked over with glistening eyes, gently patting the boy on the head while thanking God that his son was still alive, before finally looking him in the eye and admitting that Kazuya had indeed become strong. Someone inquires Yujihara for some expert coaching and asks how Tanya's character build is progressing. He sighs and replies that while her sword proficiency stat has technically gone up, she is still completely hard stuck with 0 active skills. During the class break, her friend hypes up her slow progress, prompting Tanya to offer a polite thank you, though she secretly wonders when she will finally unlock a flashy superpower of her own. Her friend tells her to just sit back and take it easy, reminding her that they are literally only at the start of their 3rd year of middle school. Suddenly, they overhear a group of nearby boys gossiping about Kazuya like they are discussing a legendary leak on Reddit. The boys mention that the kid has already unlocked high-level moves and is completely self-taught, even claiming that he managed to completely solo a high-level grizzly bear. Her friend chimes in, noting that Kazuya hasn't even bothered showing up to school since the incident, casually remarking that the guy must just possess elite main character genetics. The boys complain that the entire system is completely rigged, muttering that if they had cheat codes like his, they wouldn't even bother waking up for morning lectures. Tanya suddenly jumps into the conversation like a true defender of the grind, calling them out and stating that they are completely wrong. She fiercely insists that Kazuya works harder than anyone else in the server and shouldn't be dismissed as a simple carried player. One of the boys quickly apologizes, jokingly asking if she just hates people talking trash about her secret crush. Tanya's face instantly turns completely crimson, and she lunges at them like an angry anime girl ready to drop a hollow purple. The boys rapidly scatter down the hallway, teasing her that the local rumors must be 100% true and that they are fully rooting for her relationship arc. She stands there in absolute shock and confusion, genuinely wondering if the entire school is currently shipping her with the local sweatlord. Meanwhile, across town, Kazuya suddenly pauses mid-sentence, feeling a sudden chill as if someone had just typed his name into a group chat. His father notices the sudden glitch in his posture and asks if something is wrong with his sensory inputs. Kazuya replies that it is nothing, even though he genuinely felt like someone was talking smack about him behind his back. The school principal lets out a chuckle, remarking that the teenager has officially become a local celebrity. He explains that the administration wanted to sit down and discuss Kazuya's academic future based on the unhinged data gathered by Yujihara and the official guidelines, apologizing for the massive delay. Kazuya's father responds that it is totally fine, casually mentioning that they took the kid out to a high-level field yesterday just to test his frame data. The principal leans forward, asking if the rumors are true and if Kazuya really did delete the grizzly bear. The father confirms the kill, explaining that he and his wife have collectively decided to let their son choose his own gaming path from now on. The mother adds that she was a total hater at first, until she saw him fight in real time, admitting that the boy has reached a level of power scaling that is completely beyond their parental control, and that she has never seen him so passionate about a grind. The father continues, stating that although his son's lifestyle seems completely reckless, seeing the boy become so overpowered genuinely brings joy to his heart. The principal then slides a top-secret document across the table, explaining it is a custom progression blueprint prepared directly by the student council, leaving the parents completely stunned. It turns out Kazuya is being granted a permanent skip-school pass along with an official letter of recommendation to the Adventurers Guild. Confused by the sudden academic cheat code, the parents ask for immediate clarification. The principal calmly explains that forcing a player of Kazuya's caliber to sit through standard middle school lectures is a massive waste of potential, as there are 0 academies in the country capable of supporting his rapid level-ups. Right on cue, Kazuya chimes in, stating that he will gladly accept the dropout pass if it allows him to maximize his strength gains. His father lets out a massive sigh before agreeing to the terms, setting one mandatory condition, which is that Kazuya must return to the base for family dinner every single night. Kazuya promises to follow the rule, finalizing the agreement, with the first guild meeting officially scheduled for next Sunday at the Shizuoka branch. The moment he arrives at the location, Kazuya stands there completely amazed by the absolute scale of the venue. Back in his virtual reality days, he only ever loaded into this map to accept generic daily quests, but seeing the whole environment rendered in actual reality feels entirely different. He notices veteran players running around equipped with all kinds of premium legendary armor, though he personally feels 0 need to buy cosmetic defense gear since he plans to just dodge every hit. A polite receptionist approaches his scrawny frame, asking if he is a lost child who wandered away from his parents. He casually flashes the official school recommendation letter, explaining his situation, which causes the entire guild hall to fall into a dead, suffocating silence. The local players cannot believe that a literal middle schooler has just showed up with S-tier administrative credentials. The receptionist stands there freezing, completely unsure how to process the glitch, until the high-level guild master steps in and announces that the kid is his personal VIP guest. He introduces himself as Jai, confirming that the school principal had already sent over the kid's cracked stats beforehand. Inside the private office, Jai asks about Kazuya's current loadout, and Kazuya casually mentions he already possesses 3 active skills, which catches the master completely off guard. He explains that he only joined the guild to maximize his strength and farm high-level quests. Jai lets out a chuckle, appreciating the boy's toxic work ethic, admitting that the local map has recently seen a massive spike in monster spawn rates and that they desperately need more high DPS players. However, he firmly states that the guild has a strict policy against sending literal children into high-level raid zones. Kazuya aggressively insists that his power level is fully mature, prompting Janai to jokingly remark that the kid carries himself with the grumpy energy of an old boomer despite his youthful face. The master's expression then turns completely serious, noting that he spotted the physical trauma on Kazuya's body from the grisly fight, something the casual onlookers had completely missed. Janai reminds him with absolute seriousness that this life is not a video game, explaining that if your health bar hits 0 in this world, you experience a permanent Ray 0 reset with no respawns. He warns him that true elite players do everything possible to minimize unnecessary risks to protect both themselves and their teammates, stating that Kazuya's reckless solo behavior proves he is still a total amateur. Decide there is no point in delivering a boomer lecture, Jai proposes an immediate practical test to see if the kid is truly built different. Kazuya looks slightly confused, so Janai explains that if he can successfully clear a designated subjugation quest without getting wiped out, he will officially receive his adventure license. Kazuya agrees to the terms without a single moment of hesitation, prompting Janai to inform him that he will be forced to play in a co-op party with a designated partner. Kazuya immediately objects, claiming that he strictly plays as a solo Q warrior, only to be violently smacked on the back of his head by an angry woman who screams at him for being an arrogant little brat. Janai introduces the aggressive newcomer as Adamau, the guild's premier monster dismantling specialist. She looks completely annoyed by the tutorial assignment, while Kazuya stares back with pure toxicity. Janai reveals that their objective is to clear out a nearby flock of cockatrices, warning them that it is a highly aggressive, large-type monster that stands up to 3 meters tall with the body of a rooster and a deadly snake for a tail. The test is completely simple, as Kazuya just needs to execute one of them to pass. They arrive at the designated farming zone, and Kazuya winds up his mace, ready to initiate the encounter. He offers a quick thank you to Mao for guiding him, but she rolls her eyes, reminding him that he can still abandon the quest if he is too scared. He brushes off her concern, but she continues to pester him about the danger, asking if he has a literal death wish. Completely irritated by her nagging, he tells her to shut her mouth if she has zero intention of helping him deal damage, suggesting she just sit back and prepare to carve up the loot drops, which only makes her furious. Before their toxic argument can escalate any further, they spot their target roaming the clearing. However, instead of a solitary monster, an entire massive flock of cockatrices suddenly spawns into the zone. Mao frantically whispers that the plan is to pull a single mob away from the group, but completely ignoring the strategy, Kazuya charges straight into the center of the pack like a Leroy Jenkins clone. Utilizing his physical boost magic, he executes a massive swing that instantly one-taps the first monster into the dirt. His overall movement speed is completely broken, allowing him to quickly dart across the grass and effortlessly delete a second creature before the flock can even register his presence. Mao watches the display with her jaw on the floor, unable to comprehend why this teenager looks like he is experiencing pure dopamine while fighting for his life. Kazuya recalls his meta-knowledge, remembering that the monster's core weak point is its heart, which is heavily protected by massive chest shielding, meaning the entire fight depends on landing a frame-perfect hit on that exact spot. The next cockatrice attempts to parry his mace, but Kazuya easily animation cancels, forces a massive opening, and finishes the creature off with a critical strike. Mao grows even more flabbergasted, realizing his combat knowledge and overall strength rival that of an S-rank veteran. She flashes back to earlier at the guild hall, recalling how she had initially tried to reject the babysitting assignment until Janai explained that the kid was an absolute prodigy. The master had even showed her a newspaper clipping detailing Kazuya's unhinged power, explaining that he needed an experienced specialist like her to audit the boy and see if his build was truly legitimate. Back in the field, Kazuya snaps her out of her thoughts, telling her to stop slouching and start harvesting the loot, forcing her to reluctantly get to work. As she strips the materials, she reflects on the absolute absurdity of what she just witnessed, realizing that fighting high-level monsters in close quarters without even using a meta gun build is something she wouldn't attempt in 100 lifetimes. She genuinely doubts whether a bizarre solo player like him could ever properly fit into a standard guild party, but decides it isn't her job to judge and resolves to just report the facts to Jai. Suddenly, the severed snake tails of the dead cockatrices violently twitch and begin to move on their own. It turns out that even after the main body's health bar hits zero, the autonomous snake appendages continue to survive as separate trash mobs. Mao instantly finds herself surrounded by the hostile snakes, realizing with horror that her primary firearm is still locked inside the truck. She tries to calm her breathing, telling herself that they are just basic slithering enemies without their main bodies, but the moment one lunges directly at her throat, pure survival panic takes over, and she instinctively closes her eyes to accept her fate. In a literal fraction of a second, Kazuya executes a massive AoE strike that vaporizes every single snake in the vicinity, causing her to blink her eyes open in absolute shock. I retract what I said. Bro might actually be the chosen one. The teenager stands there looking incredibly satisfied, reading a floating notification confirming he has just unlocked a brand new active ability known as Shockwave. With this new crowd control move added to his hotbar, he can now easily deal with multiple target mobs at the exact same time. He turns to her and offers a casual apology, admitting that he completely forgot the enemy patch notes mentioned the autonomous tail mechanic. He asks if her health bar took any damage, and she quickly hides her intense awe, claiming she easily had the situation under control on her own. Right at that moment, an even larger wave of cockatrices begins to aggro onto their location from the deep forest. Kazuya lets out an excited laugh, telling her to get her carving knife ready for a massive crafting session before dashing straight back into the fray like a lunatic. She watches his departing figure in absolute disbelief, muttering that the kid's power scaling is completely impossible. After a massive farming session, Mao swiftly finishes processing the carcasses, perfectly separating the high-grade bones and feathers, leaving our young lad completely astonished by her high-speed macro efficiency. She offers a rare compliment, telling him his combat skills are actually impressive, but Kazuya shrugs it off, stating he still has a long way to go to fix his build. He mentions that he wants to wander deeper into the woods to farm a few more packs before they head home, but she firmly cuts him off, stating that the raid is officially over. He argues that his stamina bar is still full, but she points at his chipped weapon and asks how he plans to fight without durability or mana. She scolds him, stating that he needs to stop treating his life like a video game if he wants to survive in the guild, otherwise his reckless solo mindset will eventually get his entire party deleted. Kazuya stares back with cold, empty eyes, stating that maximizing his strength is his singular directive and that he does not care about anything else. Mao realizes the kid is currently going through a toxic, edgy anime protagonist phase and commands that they return to base immediately. Back at the guild headquarters, Janai's eyes pop out of his head as he reads the mission report, prompting Mao to tell him to lower his volume. The master cheerfully slaps Kazuya on the back, announcing that he has officially passed the tutorial and is being promoted directly to a rank 2 adventurer. He proudly proclaims to the entire guild hall that they have a new powerhouse on the roster, but unable to tolerate the cringe atmosphere, Mao turns around and storms out of the building. She states that she completely despises dealing with troublesome main characters, muttering that Kazuya's reckless attitude reminds her far too much of a past trauma. Kazuya watches her leave, suddenly realizing he never actually thanked her for saving his loot drops. Before he can dash after her, a greasy veteran player suddenly steps into his path, blocking his exit. The man flashes a sleazy smile, suggesting that Kazuya should ditch the solo queue life and join his elite party instead. Kazuya stares at him with total confusion, prompting the guy to explain that a party is a group of players who split exp while clearing high-level content. He brags that his entire squad consists of rank 2 pros who can clear dungeons infinitely faster than a useless utility player like Mao. A girl in his squad chimes in, loudly mocking Mao for being a weak casual who can't even hold a weapon in a real fight. The toxic comments instantly cause Kazuya's expression to darken, triggering intense flashbacks to his past gaming days. He remembers how the moment his avatar became high-level, his social inbox would get completely spammed by annoying, low-skill players trying to ride his coattails for free carries. He looks the squad leader dead in the eye, calmly asking the man to hand over his hunting knife for inspection. Kazuya examines the blade for a second, and then, without a single warning, violently slices the edge across his own palm, causing dark blood to spill onto the floor. He glares at the terrified party, stating that their trash-tier garbage knife doesn't even possess enough attack power to cleanly sever an arm, mocking them for thinking they have the macro skills to properly dismantle high-level loot. He barks at them that absolute casuals who rely on meta weapons have zero right to talk down on a specialist like Mao. Suddenly, Mao violently grabs our boy, tears swelling in her eyes like she just watched her entire squad get completely wiped out. She started screaming at him, demanding to know if his brain cells had completely rotted, before barking orders at Harumi to fetch high-grade bandages and health potions at Mach speed. She kept telling her to hurry up because Kazuya's mana bar was literally flashing red, and when he tried to ask why she was making such a massive scene, she violently cut him off, screaming that she didn't even know anymore. She cried that if his health bar hit 0, it would be permanent game over, meaning he would never maximize his stats or see his hidden anime waifu ever again. Tears were streaming down her face like a waterfall, prompting Kazuya to offer a sheepish apology while wondering why his social skills were malfunctioning so badly in this cutscene. He offered a quick thank you before casually asking her if she wanted to skip the solo queue life and form an official co-op party with him. Mao stood there completely stunned by the sudden invitation, and he doubled down on the pitch, explaining that with a high-tier utility support like her by his side, his overall DPS would become completely cracked. She was entirely taken aback by the logic, but the exact moment he added the caveat that he would obviously be the party leader, her irritability meter instantly maxed out, causing Shizuoka to chuckle from the sidelines. Meanwhile, Kazuya was back at his default base, hitting his training routine like an absolute madman, when his mother suddenly walked into the splash zone and asked if something amazing had just happened to his account. He jumped, telling her to stop jump-scaring him while he was locked in, prompting her to remind him that the breakfast buff was currently cooling on the table. His father chimed in with some classic boomer wisdom, warning him not to break his physical controller by overdoing the grind, but Kazuya simply shrugged and stated he was just performing his daily chore routine. He then whipped out his official guild certificate like a massive flex, revealing to his family that he had casually speedrun the execution of 35 high-level cockatrices over the weekend. Both of his parents stood there looking completely dumbfounded, their faces frozen like NPCs whose code had just glitched out. He casually admitted that his magic pool was still incredibly mid and needed a lot of tuning, leaving his father utterly flabbergasted by the fact that his scrawny son had already reached rank 2 status before even learning algebra. After inhaling his meal and thanking them for the food buff, he promised to return to base by dinner time. His mother flashed a wholesome smile, imagining that her antisocial gamer son had finally made some actual human friends, while his father quietly stared at his shoes, realizing the kid's rapid power scaling had completely ruined his chances of ever showing off his own cool dad skills again. The mother patted her husband's shoulder, telling him he should just be a proud casual watching his son turn into an absolute pro esports player. Later that afternoon, Kazuya arrived at the rendezvous point aggressively bowing and apologizing for being completely late to the lobby. Mao immediately called him out for his terrible ping and tardiness, while Shizuoka offered a warm, main character greeting to welcome him back. Mao continued to scold him for keeping the party waiting, but Kazuya secretly felt a massive rush of dopamine at the wholesome thought of sharing a meal with actual party members instead of eating alone in a dark room. Shizuoka thanked him for carrying the squad and handed over a literal briefcase containing 10 million yen for the cockatrice loot drops. He offered his thanks, mentioning that he had been completely immersed in a solo training montage for the past 7 days, but planned to return to the guild servers next week to accept more high-level quests. She gave him a serious look, warning him not to pull a Sasuke and disappear from the map like that again, before dropping a massive announcement, stating that the guild had formally approved his official party registration with Mao. Kazuya agreed to the terms instantly, hitting her with a rapid response time that completely caught her off guard. Turning his attention to Mao, he repeated the co-op offer, prompting her to stubbornly cross her arms and accept the invite like a classic tsundere character. He thanked her for joining the lobby, and she pointed a finger at his face, warning him that in exchange, he had to promise that neither of their health bars would ever hit 0 during a raid. Without a single hesitation, he accepted the blood pact, prompting Shizuoka to slide a glowing return stone into his palms. She explained that this mythical item was the ultimate emergency escape button, allowing them to instantly teleport back to the safe zone whenever a boss fight went completely south, a final lifeline they had to keep on their hotbars at all times. They reintroduced themselves to finalize the contract, with Kazuya casually suggesting she could drop the formal honorifics and just call him by his first name. Mao then asked if he had any free time on his schedule, leading him down the street to an absolute goldmine, the #1 premium weapon emporium in Shizuoka. Kazuya stood in the doorway completely marveled by the sheer variety of legendary equipment hanging from the walls. She casually mentioned that since his starter sword had taken massive durability damage against the rabbit, he desperately needed a meta weapon replacement, making him highly appreciate her support macro mindset. Suddenly, a massive, muscular absolute unit of a man materialized from the back of the shop. This was the legendary store owner, Sugiyama, whose overwhelming aura instantly told Kazuya that this guy was built different. Mao requested his elite assistance in finding a suitable tool for her crazy partner, prompting Sugiyama to grab Kazuya's hand to inspect his calluses. The blacksmith let out a massive laugh, praising the teenager's grip strength, and announced to the entire room that this kid was worthy of browsing his locked private collection, leaving the casual onlookers completely stunned. The old blacksmith began ranting about how modern society had become completely cooked, complaining that the current generation of cowards relied entirely on ranged gun builds instead of throwing hands. He explained that while he continued to craft high-tier clubs and swords for true Sigmas, the common trash displayed in the front window was only a microfraction of the forbidden weapons he kept hidden in the vault. He proudly presented a mythical blade forged directly from the literal bone of a dragon, perfectly balanced for maximum attack power, defense scaling, and magical resistance. Kazuya balanced it on his finger, noting that its physical weight felt completely weightless, prompting Sugiyama to set the premium price tag at a cool 2 million yen to reflect the flawless craftsmanship involved. However, Kazuya's sweaty gamer eyes were immediately drawn to a completely different item hidden in the corner of the room. Sugiyama's eyes widened in surprise, admitting he never expected a kid to notice his legendary magical staff crafted entirely out of pure mithril, known across the servers as the Sugiyama Deluxe. Mao's jaw hit the floor at the sheer absurdity of the weapon, and even Kazuya paused for a brief frame to admire the absolute ridiculousness of the item. He immediately locked in his choice, explaining to his confused partner that since pure mithril granted a passive multiplier to magical scaling, his active heal spells and attack buffs would become completely overpowered. Plus, he could simultaneously grind his staff proficiency stat to eventually unlock top-tier magic spells. He reasoned there was absolutely zero logical sense not to buy the cheat code weapon. Sugiyama's face lit up with pure joy, revealing that the staff was his absolute magnum opus creation, and despite recommending it to dozens of high-level sorcerers, every single one of those casuals had rejected it because it looked too heavy. But now, the blacksmith wanted to test Kazuya's frame data to see if his power level was truly legitimate. Kazuya blinked in confusion, but Sugiyama barked at him to ready the weapon and show him his stance. Mao tried to frantically intervene before her partner accidentally demolished the shop architecture, but Kazuya casually waved her off, reassuring her that he was just going to show off his basic posture. Sugiyama observed the teenager's center of gravity closely, his eyes sparkling with pure respect as he declared that this unhinged, focused stance was exactly how a true apex adventurer was supposed to look. Back in the shop, an adventurer startles the receptionist, but Sugiyama appears and strikes him, stating that worthless people like him should not pretend. He declares that their complete reliance on guns has made them cowards. The old man began reflecting on how drastically the combat meta had changed over the past few decades, noting that more and more players had shifted to safe gun builds, so they could easily cheese enemies from a distance without ever risking their own health bars. He explained that this modern shortcut had caused the new generation of adventurers to completely neglect their physical training, losing the core desire to break past their human limits and grow truly strong. He admitted he had spent years making lame excuses to his own ego, telling himself that times had changed and the old ways were dead, until a bizarre, logic-defying anomaly like Kazuya stepped into his shop. Despite his old boomer age, the blacksmith found himself feeling like a hopeful anime mentor once again. He looked Kazuya dead in the eye, asking if he truly understood how brutal and unforgiving the melee path he had chosen actually was, pointing out that using a meta gun would make him powerful with zero effort, yet the boy deliberately chose the hardest grind imaginable. Kazuya casually scratched his head, admitting he didn't fully comprehend all the deep philosophy, but he knew for a fact that a true champion never relied on easy shortcuts to max out his build, stating there was only one ultimate milestone he wanted to clear. Sugiyama noticed Kazuya slowly lowering the massive staff, but in that split-second transition, his blacksmith instincts detected an absolute wave of pure, terrifying bloodlust radiating from the kid's body, making him genuinely wonder if this teenager was actually a hidden Jujutsu Kaisen antagonist masquerading as a middle schooler. The old man suddenly broke into a massive smirk, claiming he was just testing the boy's vibe check and officially agreed to sell him the legendary Sugiyama Deluxe. Kazuya asked if he was truly certain about parting with his masterpiece, and Sugiyama told him to just make sure he brought the staff back to the shop for routine maintenance whenever he broke the environment. Kazuya offered a firm nod, promising he would continue his toxic grind until he was completely unstoppable. Mao, looking completely annoyed by the weird hypermasculine bonding session that had just taken place, demanded to know what kind of anime monologue she had just been forced to watch. Sugiyama laughed, explaining to her that Kazuya had just flashed him a terrifying look that clearly signaled he was about to end the old man's life for real if he didn't hand over the weapon, adding that only a suicidal fool would ever dare to grief this kid in a PvP zone. The blacksmith then looked at Mao, openly questioning if her low-tier movement speed could even keep up with the boy's unhinged pacing. Mao huffed, rolling her eyes and claiming that he was just a generic, everyday kid who needed to touch some grass. He tilted his head in confusion, wondering if his partner genuinely lacked the brain cells to realize how absolutely cracked his character build actually was, prompting her to call him a complete psycho and violently smack him on the back of his head. Sugiyama burst into a boisterous laugh, declaring that their toxic dynamic made them a top-tier team. His jaw dropped even further when Kazuya casually whipped out a massive stack of cold, hard cash to pay for the transaction in full, completely draining his in-game bank account to zero in a single frame. Even though he was now officially broke, Kazuya was the proud owner of a completely broken, high-tier magical staff. Mao smiled, highly pleased by his commitment to the grind, but her surprise reached an absolute fever pitch when Kazuya suddenly handed her a beautifully wrapped gift box containing a rare, premium mithril carving knife. He casually explained that Sugiyama had tossed it into the bundle as a complimentary bonus to thank her for agreeing to carry the kid in a party. She instantly blushed, stubbornly protesting that she only accepted the co-op invite for the fat gold payouts, but still muttered a quiet thank you for the upgrade. Kazuya firmly stated that he was the one who owed her a massive debt of gratitude for stepping into the raid zone with him. She then asked if they were scheduled to go farm some local mobs tomorrow morning, but Kazuya shook his head, stating he already had mandatory real-life obligations on his calendar. He explained he had to actually attend his first day of school, pulling out an official flyer detailing an upcoming campus battle royale tournament. Mao immediately recognized the event page, and Kazuya declared his absolute intention to enter the bracket and sweep the competition. She offered a nod of encouragement, fully believing his overpowered stats would easily secure him a spot in the finals. But as she scanned the fine print at the bottom of the page, today was the absolute final deadline to register for the tournament. Kazuya completely froze in place, his face turning entirely pale as he realized his terrible time management skills were about to ruin his entire competitive arc. The perspective then aggressively shifted to a standard classroom, where a generic teacher was standing at the chalkboard explaining the rules of the highly anticipated upcoming tournament. The faculty had kept the exact fight format a total state secret to prevent metagaming, but the teacher firmly warned the class that they needed to perform like absolute demons if they wanted to secure a formal recommendation letter to the high-stakes prefecture tournament. One overly enthusiastic student named Naruko immediately viewed the event as a massive opportunity to show off his skills, but his stoic friend Shigeru told him to stop acting like an excited little kid during a lecture. Another student named Nanes flashed a confident smirk, prompting the teacher to drop a harsh reality check, reminding the freshmen that high-level third-year seniors were fully allowed to enter the bracket as well. The instructor warned them to stop crying about getting hurt, admitting that while every single year a massive percentage of overconfident first-year students got violently sent straight to the local hospital, it was still mechanically possible to defeat the upperclassmen if their strategy was clean. The teacher then revealed to the class that the student council president, Karen Tanya, had actually accomplished that exact impossible feat during her freshman year, inviting her up to the stage to deliver some motivational words to the new kids. Tanya elegantly stepped up to the podium, prompting Naruko to immediately raise his hand and demand to know the exact build guide she used to secure the legendary victory. She calmly explained that last year's competitive map focused entirely on a monster subjugation challenge, revealing she had successfully solo-cleared a high-level cockatrice in under 2 hours. Naruko scoffed, questioning if the upperclassmen back then were just generic E-rank casuals, but Shigeru quickly corrected his friend, pointing out that several of the contestants were actually certified D-rank pros. Tanya admitted to the freshman class that the developers had yet to leak the official format for this year's bracket, but she passionately promised to give it her absolute all on the field, encouraging everyone to optimize their skills and inspire each other to unlock their true potentials. Right at that exact moment of peak inspiration, a notorious hater in the back row named Kageyama slowly raised his hand, loudly pointing out that their freshman class had inherited a completely broken, cheating pay-to-win player this semester. He aggressively demanded to know what the faculty planned to do to balance the bracket if that specific anomaly decided to enter the tournament. Tanya's expression instantly hardened, firmly responding that while Kazuya was indeed an absolute force of nature on the field, absolutely nobody in the room understood the sheer volume of toxic, unhinged hours the boy had sacrificed hitting a log in a gym, stating that calling his hard work a cheat code was completely disrespectful to the grind. Kageyama slammed his desk and argued back, shouting that the kid already possessed active high-tier combat skills before even attending a single classroom lecture, and had casually deleted a boss grizzly bear over the weekend. He questioned how any normal, free-to-play student was supposed to stay motivated, knowing an absolute smurf was lurking in the bracket, claiming that even Tanya's legendary achievements looked like complete garbage compared to Kazuya's power scaling. Right on cue, the school bell violently rang, prompting the hater to pack his bags, stand up, and exit the room while flipping off the stage. Tanya let out a heavy sigh as she watched him leave, quietly admitting to her inner monologue that if she were a low-level casual staring up at Kazuya's broken stat sheet, she would probably feel like a total hater too, noting that the boy's true depth of power was something her analytical brain couldn't even calculate. Suddenly, her train of thought was completely interrupted by a nervous background student named Mono, who approached the podium to thank her for the epic, high-energy speech. He explained that he had specifically enrolled at the academy because he was a massive fan of her leadership skills, prompting her to sweat and tell him to calm his hyperactive energy down. He awkwardly apologized for his massive social anxiety, and she asked what specific business he wanted to discuss with the student council. He revealed to her that on the first day of school, the principal was about to force his low-level self into a public hazing ritual on stage, but Kazuya had heroically stepped into the crosshairs and saved his entire reputation. Mono admitted that since the legendary savior hadn't shown his face on campus since that afternoon, he was deeply worried about his welfare. Tanya raised an eyebrow in confusion, causing Mono to awkwardly stutter and ask if the two of them were secretly dating behind the scenes. Tanya's irritation meter instantly ruptured, and she violently grabbed the poor kid by his collar, shaking him back and forth like a ragdoll while screaming at him to stop reading trashy romance manga. Right at that precise moment of peak comedy, another random student materialized in the doorway, loudly accusing her of cheating on him with Kazuya when she was supposed to be his official anime girlfriend. Mono blinked in confusion, asking who this random delusional character even was, and Tanya let out a disgusted sigh, explaining that the intruder was a delusional third-year senior named Sasahara. She explained that she had accidentally saved his low-level life from a mob last semester, and ever since that day, his brain had developed some incredibly bizarre, unhinged fantasies about her. Sasahara glared down at Mono, violently demanding to know if this scrawny freshman was the rival suitor trying to steal his girl. Mono frantically tried to explain that he was just an innocent bystander, but Sasahara completely refused to listen to logic, drawing his training blade and charging across the floor like an unhinged antagonist. Without a single thought, Tanya vanished from her position and perfectly parried his incoming sword strike with her own blade, looking exactly like a captain from Bleach shutting down a rookie. Sasahara blinked in total confusion as she glared through his soul, coldly stating that she was currently in a terrible, trash-tier mood and had absolutely zero intention of holding back her damage output. Moving with frame-perfect precision, she executed a rapid, high-speed combo that instantly knocked the senior completely unconscious, leaving him slumped against the wall like a discarded sack of potatoes. She looked down at his sleeping body, delivering a cold warning that he needed to keep her name out of his mouth without proper honorific titles before she permanently deleted his account. Mono stood there completely amazed by the sheer main character energy, loudly proclaiming that her combat skills were absolutely incredible, to which she casually shrugged and stated it was just a standard low-diff encounter. Suddenly, a massive, chaotic racket echoed from the hallway outside the room. Kazuya and Mao violently burst through the double doors, with Mao aggressively barking at him to double-check his calendar app while he frantically repeated that he had already offered 3 separate apologies for his terrible latency. She pointed her finger at the master clock, screaming that he literally had less than 5 minutes left on the registration timer and needed to sprint to the desk before his competitive season was permanently cooked. Kazuya suddenly blinked, noticing Tanya standing in the center of the room, prompting the student council president to demand to know why the campus celebrity was hanging out with a notorious high-level guild specialist. Mao offered a perfectly calm, veteran greeting to diffuse the tension. A few moments later, the front desk receptionist walked over and formally informed Kazuya that his tournament registration had been successfully processed into the bracket, causing Tanya to let out a massive sigh of relief that they had managed to beat the timer. Kazuya offered his sincere thanks to the president before turning his attention to Sasahara's unconscious body on the floor, asking if her friend was still alive, to which she casually replied that his health bar would probably recover by next period. She admitted she never expected a hardcore solo grinder like him to actually enter a casual school event, assuming he viewed campus life as a massive waste of farming time. Kazuya quickly clarified that his mindset had completely shifted, explaining that his recent solo raids had taught him that hitting a wooden log in isolation had strict mechanical limits, and entering a competitive tournament would allow him to stress test his build against other players his age to see how the local meta was scaling. Tanya then narrowed her eyes, asking the million-dollar question about how a scrawny freshman and a legendary guild specialist had managed to form a party together. Kazuya sweated briefly, offering a highly edited summary of his financial struggles and slime farming adventures. Tanya listened to the story, remarking that their co-op pairing was an absolute wild coincidence, casually revealing to the group that she didn't realize her older sister used to run high-level raids with Mao back in the day. She explained that before her sister left for university, her veteran party had become incredibly famous across the region, but due to the recent global spike in monster spawn rates, her sister was currently putting her life at extreme risk traveling the country to clear dungeons. She looked at Kazuya with absolute main character intensity, stating that Mao possessed a soft heart that couldn't ignore a reckless, suicidal idiot who ran headfirst into danger, delivering a final, terrifying threat that if Kazuya ever made her old family friend cry during a raid, she would personally drop a hollow purple on his entire life. Kazuya agreed to the terms without a single frame of hesitation, prompting Tanya to drop her hostile aura and offer to show him around the massive campus training facilities. Kazuya mentioned he had originally planned to head straight back to the gym to resume his daily log-beating routine, but she encouraged him to actually touch some grass and take his time for once. Meanwhile, hidden in the shadows of the corridor, a shady group of students was quietly observing their interactions from a distance. These were the low-level minions belonging to Kageyama's toxic faction, and watching Kazuya's name pop up on the tournament bracket filled them with absolute dread. Worried that they were going to get violently sent to the hospital instead of winning the prize pool, they frantically turned to their leader and asked what their strategy should be. Kageyama stepped forward into the light, scoffing at his squad's cowardice and correcting them that the #1 golden rule when preparing to face a final raid boss wasn't just mindless teamwork, but gathering elite information. He explained that they needed to thoroughly analyze the opponent's frame data, cooldown limits, and hitbox vulnerabilities, declaring that their sole mission for the upcoming week was to stalk Kazuya and gather as much raw data on his character build as humanly possible. A few minutes later, Tanya escorted Kazuya into the Grand Academy Gymnasium, showing him the official tournament practice grounds and explaining that the venue remained open after hours so students could optimize their combos. Kazuya scanned the room with his sweaty gamer eyes, noting with a sigh that every single student looked incredibly stressed out, sweating over their gear and entirely failing to experience any actual dopamine from the combat system. Nearby, Naruko was screaming at Shigeru to throw another 100 practice projectiles at his face to train his dodge parameters. Shigeru initially refused to indulge his friend's masochistic routine, but Naruko easily hyped him up until he agreed, with Shigeru warning that during the second half of the drill, he was going to intentionally aim for his vitals as if he were trying to delete his life for real, an unhinged promise that only filled Naruko with intense anime excitement. Kazuya watched the bizarre training method in absolute amazement, thinking the local casuals were truly built different. Suddenly, without a single audio cue, a hidden student tried to launch a massive, cowardly ambush on Kazuya from his blind spot. However, possessing the cracked spatial awareness of a veteran pro player, Kazuya sensed the incoming threat instantly, perfectly spinning his mithril staff around to parry the strike with a metallic clang right on time. From a high vantage point in the bleachers, Kageyama was quietly recording the entire encounter on his smartphone, hyper-focusing on Kazuya's reaction time. Kazuya glared at the attacker, demanding to know what kind of random NPC dared to grief him in a safe zone, but before he could get a single answer, a second student violently swung from the left flank. Kazuya ducked and dodged the incoming hit effortlessly, moving like a Naruto character dodging kunai, realizing to his inner monologue that fighting actual human players simultaneously felt incredibly easy compared to tracking the erratic frame data of a wild horned rabbit. Tanya stepped forward to violently interrogate the rogue attackers for breaking school safety protocols, but Kazuya raised a hand to stop her, stating he didn't mind a little free warm-up practice. Up in the rafters, Kageyama continued to continuously zoom his camera lens in on Kazuya's movements, determined to locate a fatal flaw in his perfect defensive routine while quietly cursing the main character under his breath. Tanya steps into the crossfires, dropping a hard reality check that students cannot legally initiate a PvP duel without official administrator approval. Kazuya, looking completely locked in, casually replies that he has zero complaints as long as he gets to test his frame data against actual human targets. Without missing a beat, the two rogue opponents charge at him simultaneously with maximum aggression, but Kazuya dodges their incoming hitboxes effortlessly, moving like an anime character playing at double speed before deleting them both using nothing but his bare hands. Standing over their slumped bodies like a final boss, he immediately begins taunting the rest of the lobby to step up to the plate. He acknowledges to his inner monologue that bare fists are traditionally reserved for high-ranking, endgame job classes, meaning his current garbage-based stats prevent him from fully mastering their true potential. Still, the absolute versatility and disrespect of throwing hands appeals to his inner sweatlord. Despite having maxed out multiple skill proficiencies through pure toxic grinding, a dedicated fist proficiency attribute has yet to spawn on his floating status sheet. The only logical explanation is that his base level is still far too mid to unlock the hidden tree. Since he has been actively dodging the usual grinding method of farming wild monsters for EXP, he resolves to farm actual human players instead, which was his entire secret motive for entering the campus battle royale in the first place. With main character energy fully charged, he dashes directly at his next challenger, who looks completely flabbergasted by the sheer impact force radiating from Kazuya's bare knuckles. As the skirmish continues, Kazuya realizes that hyper-focusing his observation parameters allows him to read the opponent's sword arcs before the animations even finish, proving that whether he is fighting endgame boss monsters or generic high school casuals, reading frame data is the ultimate cheat code. Observing the action from a high vantage point in the bleachers, Kageyama furiously records every single second on his phone, noting with absolute terror that Kazuya shows zero fear of taking permanent durability damage or bodily harm. Kazuya casually remarks to his opponent that repeatedly punching heavy iron armor with his bare hands has already fractured multiple bones in his fingers, before spamming his low-level heal spell like a continuous health glitch to reset his status back to 100%. He openly flexes that he intends to make bare fists his primary DPS weapon, meaning he plans to use the poor kid as a living sandbag for a little while longer just to force level his hidden stats. Up in the rafters, Kageyama continues capturing every single frame, letting out a sinister, quiet laugh like a budget villain plotting a revenge arc. Nearby, Shigeru watches the absolute beatdown in total awe, turning to a stunned Naruko to reassure him that their scrawny classmate is going to scale into an absolute force of nature in due time. Naruko's brain completely short-circuits at the sight. Kazuya is moving with terrifying speed, overwhelming power, and using literally zero weapons. Growing bored of the one-sided routine, Kazuya asks his opponent if he even plans to press an attack button today, admitting he is getting tired of chasing a running NPC across the map. Irritated by the disrespect, the boy finally winds up a desperate strike, but Kazuya sidesteps the swing without taking a single point of damage. He notes to himself that inflicting psychological pressure on an opponent's mental health bar is just as effective as landing a critical hit. Suddenly, Kazuya notices the boy's eyes nervously darting toward the bleachers, instantly realizing that Kageyama is actually remotely controlling his movements like a backseat gamer. The boy lunges forward once again, but Kazuya's target priority instantly shifts, recognizing that Kageyama is the true raid boss behind the scenes. Locking eyes with the hater up in the bleachers, Kazuya stares him down with terrifying bloodlust before unleashing 100% of his physical strength, hitting the puppet student with a strike so violently overpowered, it sends him crashing straight through the gym wall like a ragdoll. Kageyama breaks into a chaotic laugh, muttering under his breath that Kazuya's stats are genuinely impressive, but promises to reveal his ultimate counter-strategy tomorrow before retreating into the shadows. Kazuya simply smirks, replying that he is genuinely looking forward to the PvP match. Tanya frantically rushes over to check the fallen student's health bar, internally questioning if her own skill build could ever hope to survive a direct hit from Kazuya. Still refusing to let her mental bar break, she vows that she will optimize her combos, win the tournament bracket, and successfully catch up to her legendary sister. The tournament loudspeakers blared across the festival grounds with max volume, loudly announcing, "It has now begun." In the background, random extra students were casually checking out busy food stands, desperately hunting for cheap hot dogs like broke gamers waiting for a Steam summer sale. Watching as an unseen announcer hyped up the fact that the Fierce Battle Royale was officially launching today. An excited host wearing a stylish white suit and top hat hijacked center stage as the grand tournament officially kicked its power into high gear. Meanwhile, Kazuya was walking through the packed area next to Mano, looking like a total NPC in a high-stress lobby. Mano instantly picked up on his stiff posture and asked what was wrong with his ping, to which Kazuya whispered under his breath that his social anxiety always maxed out whenever he was forced to step into loud, crazy crowds, while Mano gently reminded him that the welcoming tournament was a required daily task on their schedule anyway. As they kept walking, Kazuya checked out the surrounding area, pointing out that a scary number of students were showing off full-body, high-level armor. Mano looked over at the huge weapon case strapped to Kazuya's back, nervously asking if his character setup was going to be fine running just that heavy loadout. But Kazuya offered a cold, plain, yeah, thinking he is Ayanokoji or something. Stepping up to the stage in full tactical armor like an endgame boss, Student Council President Tanya Karen grabbed the mic to officially address the crowd, thanking everyone for logging into the spring tournament. Down in the audience, Kazuya blinked in total surprise, whispering to himself that he had never seen her wear full armor gear before. Gripping the mic tightly, Tanya raised her fist in the air and proudly stated on behalf of last year's winners that she promised to get the victory royale this year too, no matter what. Her strong presence radiating pure energy left the surrounding audience fall silent, with one student nervously saying that the president was surprisingly scary when she got angry, and another noting with quiet awe that she genuinely felt like a completely different high-level person today. With a big, dramatic gesture, the host pulled open the massive stage curtains, excitedly cutting through the heavy tension to reveal the official rules set for this year's competition. Pointing toward a huge tournament bracket board, he cheerfully broke down the setup, explaining that players would be split into two separate blocks to fight it out, with the block winners facing off in the final match. He then smoothly moved into the ground rules, explaining that while all physical weapons except high-tech guns were fully allowed on the field, Winning was done simply by dropping an opponent's health bar to zero or forcing them to hit the give up button. As the students crowded around the newly revealed brackets, one girl excitedly pointed out to Nanes that they were placed in the exact same block. Naruko noticed that his masked friend Shigeru had also been placed in Block B, to which Shigeru calmly replied that the matchups had turned out mostly as his smart brain had predicted. Naruko then turned his attention away from his own bracket, as he whispered that Kazuya had somehow ended up completely alone over in Block A. Checking their assigned block, Kazuya and Mano suddenly found themselves completely hidden by a literal wall of huge, heavily armored older students. Up in the teacher viewing room, a worried blonde teacher immediately questioned the clearly fake matchmaking. Sitting comfortably at her desk, a woman with glasses gave a sly smile as a male coworker praised the setup. She casually brushed off the praise, claiming that the sudden bracket change was simply a custom request given directly by the PTA. Down in Block A, a smug, low-level senior suddenly singled the freshman out, pointing directly at Kazuya and trash-talking him, warning the kid that Block A was packed with fierce, Tryhard veterans, and made fun of him to say his final goodbyes to Tanya before he got completely run over. Kazuya initially just stared back, completely confused by the crazy trash talk, genuinely wondering what random nonsense this guy was talking about. The senior simply narrowed his eyes, coldly saying that he would prefer if the upcoming match didn't waste too much of his quick-run time. Completely ignoring the senior's mean trash talk, Kazuya walked directly up to the main stage and approached the confused host. Catching the presenter completely off guard, Kazuya casually reached out and asked if he could borrow the microphone for a quick moment. Taking hold of the mic, Kazuya boldly spoke to the entire arena, catching everyone's attention by suggesting the crazy idea of adding a special new rule to the tournament setup. He boldly suggested his custom rule to the crowd, a massive, crazy match putting just himself against every single player present in the area. As Tanya watched the scene unfold with a sharp, serious look, Kazuya directly challenged the leaders, calling out to the principal to ask if he would approve the absolute madness. The loud senior's smug attitude completely broke. Caught completely off guard by the huge disruption on the field, the principal began sweating heavily like a slow server. Up in the stands, the other first-years reacted to Kazuya's completely crazy move. Shigeru calmly noticed that his friend was crying again as Naruko ran off in tears while stubbornly denying it, while Nane simply watched the scene unfold and whispered that Kazuya was completely, hopelessly crazy. Kazuya just stood there, completely unfazed. His voice cut through the heavy tension as he calmly stated that he heard everyone present was participating because they desperately wanted to unlock new active skills. Down in the crowd, the various older students and tryhards listened in stunned silence. Gripping the microphone with an intense look, Kazuya stared down the whole crowd and confidently declared that he would personally teach the secret method to getting an active skill to absolutely anyone who managed to beat him in a fight. Kazuya finished his bold offer by casually telling the armored seniors that they could simply ignore his offer if they weren't interested in leveling up their setups. The clear disrespect landed exactly as intended, causing one of the angry older students to lower his head with a dark smile, meanly whispering that the arrogant freshman was making a complete fool out of them. Taking the bait instantly, he jumped into action with his twin swords pulled out, coldly declaring that he would personally teach Kazuya just how strict the school rules really were. Focusing on the enemy, the announcer introduced the strong team of volunteering seniors led by Sasahara. Hyping up the game, the host dramatically asked if the single first-year would be able to make it out of the fight in one piece without getting knocked out. Watching the spectacle happen from the stands, Kazuya's team member Mao looked down at the field in absolute annoyance and plain calls him an idiot, pointing out that he was standing out way too much now. Up in the stands, a dark-haired female student noticed that not everyone had decided to join the attack against Kazuya. However, Mao pointed out that more than half the block still took him up on the challenge as they looked down at the huge crowd of armed fighters on the field, guessing there were around 50 tryhards in total. She wondered out loud just how Kazuya was raised to end up as such a fight-crazed, crazy person, while his parents sat nearby looking down, completely ashamed of their son's wild behavior. Mao narrowed her eyes with a serious, strong expression, confidently stating that Kazuya would be fine. Kazuya stood tall and completely fine, resting his massive black club over his shoulder with a sharp, serious look. Down on the field, Sasahara smugly made fun of Kazuya, asking if he was scared to face a 50-person team all at once. Completely unimpressed, Kazuya casually replied, "Nah," moving like our boy Gojo, and bluntly admitted that he was actually disappointed to see that only a few people came out to fight him. Up in the stands, Nanis questioned the craziness of the tournament's rules, while Tanya pointed out that it supposedly meant to be a welcoming event for freshmen. However, the sad reality on the field revealed it to be a harsh initiation ritual. Looking over the scene, Principal Todoroki quietly watched the incoming beatdown from the shadows. Up on the stage, the PTA president took the microphone and introduced herself as Sasahara. Down on the field, the heavily armored senior excitedly waved his sword and yelled out to her, revealing that she was actually his mother. Continuing her speech on the big screen, she explained that this year's tournament was originally designed as a safe one-on-1 setup so players could show off their skills, noting that every year they found tournament players breaking the rules. The voiceover then directly called out those who had no respect for our school, shifting focus to a serious close-up of Kazuya, strongly hinting that the leaders were targeting him directly. Up on the stage, the woman with glasses raised her hand to show that the school strictly valued tradition and order, warning that any rule breakers would be harshly punished to keep them on the right path. Down on the field, Kazuya casually ignored her mean speech, just as a loud bell violently rang out across the arena to signal the start of the fight. Tightly holding his weapon as the heavily armored older students began their charge, he calmly thought to himself that since this new world was exactly like the game, its core idea had to be exactly the same as well. And that was that you had to risk your life in order to truly grow stronger. Jumping into action with an intense, steady look, Kazuya violently swung his massive black club forward, sending one of the heavily armored seniors flying backward with a brutal hit. With an intense look, Kazuya quickly tracked the incoming attack as an armored senior aggressively jumped forward with a heavy downward sword strike. Unbothered by the attack, Kazuya easily blocked the blade using the thick body of his massive club, firmly putting his foot on the sword to easily catch his balance and prepare himself for a powerful counterattack. With the senior completely caught off guard and letting out a surprised gasp, Kazuya mercilessly brought his massive club crashing down, delivering a huge, explosive hit directly to his opponent's helmet with a loud sound of impact. Continuing his non-stop attack, with fast speed, he easily moved through a storm of incoming sword swings, instantly hitting back with quick, heavy blows that sent multiple seniors stumbling backward in shock. Standing among the scattered, defeated bodies of the older students, Kazuya casually rested his club on his shoulder and calmly noted that he had taken down 10 opponents, leaving 40 more to go. Watching the huge display of power, the remaining armored seniors began to panic in disbelief, desperately turning to Sasahara as they realized he had lied about the freshman being weak and only getting into the school through connections. Kazuya steadily stepped forward to continue the one-sided fight. Shouting a battle cry as he jumped into the air with his massive club raised high, Kazuya charged head-on, causing Sasahara to desperately scream for a shield to block the incoming attack as the freshman quickly closed the distance. Following up on his aggressive charge, Kazuya violently slammed directly into Sasahara with a huge tackle, completely breaking the armored senior's defensive stance with a massive shockwave. Kazuya coldly warned him that he wouldn't be able to simply block his attacks like that. Watching their leader get so easily crushed, the remaining armored seniors completely lost their courage. Dropping their weapons in a panic, they desperately ran from the arena while shouting excuses about upcoming tests and avoiding injuries. Left beaten and alone on the ground, a frustrated Sasahara desperately called out to his running teammates, only to watch them completely leave him behind. As the dust settled across the massive arena, Kazuya was left standing alone near the fallen Sasahara. Looking down at the shaking senior, Kazuya stood his ground as a terrified Sasahara hid and fearfully asked if he was going to attack. Seeing the once arrogant senior reduced to crying tears and realizing he had even dropped his weapons in fear, Kazuya looked on with total disappointment. Kazuya coldly concluded that there was absolutely no reason for him to go to this school. Suddenly, a ninja-like attacker jumped from above with a knife as someone yelled for them to hit now. However, Kazuya instantly reacted to the surprise attack and blocked it easily. As the blocked attacker slid backward across the ground, Kazuya casually rested his massive club on his shoulder, realizing that the freshman had absolutely no idea who had just tried to surprise attack him. The attacker with glasses finally introduced himself as Naozumi Kageyama, confidently declaring that he would be the one to beat him. Standing before the newly arrived, heavily armed group, Kazuya casually asked who they were. The fighter with glasses smiled and coldly responded that it made total sense he wouldn't know them, sarcastically noting that Kazuya had been favored enough to completely skip coming to school, revealing that they were actually first-year students, just like Kazuya. As Kazuya processed this info with a slightly surprised look, the student with glasses plainly finished his thought, adding that despite being classmates, every single one of them completely hated him. Reacting to the bold claim that they all hated Kazuya, Naruko quickly jumped in to clarify that he didn't actually hate him. However, Shigeru firmly reminded him of their plan. Looking out at Kazuya standing alone against their ranks, they locked in their strategy by admitting that taking him down was their main priority. Meanwhile, Kejama expressed his thanks to the defeated seniors for giving them such a great chance to strike. He openly made fun of their lack of a plan, plainly stating that it was incredibly dumb to attack Kazuya without any kind of strategy at all. As Sasahara weakly asked what had just happened, Kejama stepped forward with a smile, telling the fallen fighters that they could just leave the rest of the battle to them now. Standing completely together and heavily armed, the group of freshmen boldly named themselves the First Year Alliance, firmly promising that they would be the ones to finally beat him. Checking his opponent's strength, Kazuya stared ahead with intense eyes, silently admitting that while the surprise attack had caught him off guard, the resulting kick had packed a genuinely impressive amount of power. Excitedly realizing that this battle might actually turn out to be a lot of fun after all, Kazuya gripped his massive club and stepped forward into a fighting stance, expressing his total relief as he boldly declared that he hadn't had nearly enough fighting just yet. Kazuya directly teased his new enemies by asking them to please last a little bit longer than the older students did. Kejama tightly gripped his weapon and angrily shouted back that Kazuya's arrogant confidence was actually his absolute biggest weak point. As the first years launched their teamed-up attack, Kazuya calmly looked at their formation, admitting that a fast team like this could definitely be annoying to deal with. However, easily dodging under a close sword swing with a sharp, focused look, Kazuya easily avoided the incoming blade and confidently noted that their speed and teamwork weren't even on the same level as the seniors he had just destroyed. Continuing the crazy fight, Kazuya let out a huge hit with his heavy club. The sheer power of the hit sent trash flying as the shielded student loudly grunted. Taking a quick moment to look at the changing battlefield, he calmly looked around and wondered out loud when they had managed to push him into such a tight corner. However, completely brushing off the apparent problem with a casual anyway. Kazuya brought his massive club crashing down onto the first year's shield, forcing the defender to groan in pain under the crushing weight of the hit. Kazuya calmly declared that such weak defenses wouldn't be able to last against him. Kejama showed a dark, knowing smile and coldly called Kazuya an idiot. Suddenly, a massive rain of sharp throwing weapons fell down from the sky, completely covering the area above Kazuya. As Kejama declared that he had just stepped into the trap, watching the deadly wave of blades show in his sharp eyes, he calmly noted that his opponents had resorted to using throwing weapons. As the deadly wave of throwing weapons rained down on him, Kazuya reacted with crazy speed, wildly swinging his heavy club to easily block every single blade before they could even reach him. Seeing his carefully planned attack completely stopped, Kejama clicked his tongue in pure frustration. Watching this display of huge skill, the heavily armed team of first years looked on in absolute shock, openly admitting in awe that Kazuya had blocked all of the objects and calling him a total monster. Meanwhile, eager to finally get into the action himself, an impatient Naruko loudly interrupted the tense moment, aggressively asking Kejama when it would be his turn to fight. Kejama told the impatient Naruko to wait, promising him that his turn to fight would come a little bit later. Meanwhile, back on the chaotic battlefield, Kazuya quickly jumped back to dodge another well-planned hit from the armored first years. As he watched their exact movements and setups, Kazuya mentally noted their impressive fighting harmony, silently admitting that they possessed some genuinely perfect teamwork. As the scary creature showed its huge mouth in his mind, Kazuya silently noted to himself that facing their unified team felt exactly like fighting one giant, nasty monster. As the team launched their synchronized huge attack, shown by the giant monster violently jumping forward to hit, Kazuya stayed fiercely focused. With his eyes narrowed in pure focus, he tightly held his weapon and fiercely swung his heavy club to meet the huge attack head-on. Sending his attackers stumbling backward in shock with quick, exact movements of his club, he calmly observed that while their teamwork might be solid, their individual fighting skills simply weren't good enough to pose any real threat to him. As he powerfully smashed through their teamed-up defenses, Kazuya internally picked out the main flaw in their perfect teamwork. He realized that because their strength relied entirely on their combined setup, taking down just a single member of the group would cause the whole team to naturally fall apart. Standing calmly in the middle of the crazy battlefield, Kazuya took a moment to internally praise his opponents. Admitting that their teamwork was clearly impressive, he silently wondered just how long the first years had been carefully practicing to get such perfect, synchronized teamwork. Thinking about the extremely short time frame of the battle, Kazuya mentally noted that the exact details for this match were only officially revealed earlier today. Kazuya was genuinely impressed, thinking to himself how amazing it was that someone had managed to gather and perfectly lead such a massive number of people in such a short amount of time. However, Kejama stared back with a very mean, half-shadowed look, directly asking him if that was really what he thought happened. As someone suddenly approached Kazuya at super speed, Kejama confidently revealed the scary truth behind their great teamwork, boldly declaring that he had actually set all of this up way in advance specifically to beat him, executing a cold, calculated move worthy of an advanced, nurturing high school mastermind. Following Kejama's scary news, Naruko fiercely jumped at Kazuya from behind with wide, intense eyes, holding his weapon tightly. Suddenly caught completely off guard, Kazuya quickly put together the real trick behind their fake strategy, realizing that one of the attackers had actually smartly hidden himself inside the massive wave of thrown weapons. Sliding low across the ground on a large shield with a fierce look and a blade held tightly in his teeth, Naruko closed the distance in a flash. So have they won? Absolutely not. Kazuya openly praised their teamed-up plan, casually admitting that it was an absolutely amazing trick. Yet, with a confident and steady attitude, he firmly crushed their hopes by plainly telling them that despite their clever planning, they simply weren't strong enough yet to actually beat him. Standing tall after the intense fight, Kazuya looked over the small remaining group and calmly pointed out that they were the only ones left. Shifting his sharp focus directly to their leader, he confidently asked Kageyama if he happened to have any more plans or tricks left in store for him. Kageyama simply clicked his tongue in clear annoyance. However, the tension immediately rose again as another person stepped forward with a heavy sound of her boot. Holding her spear with new focus, one of the female knights stepped forward and apologized to her friend, Karen, firmly declaring that she was joining the fight. She pointed out that if the first years were actually able to push Kazuya this hard, they might stand a real chance of winning if all the remaining second and third years joined together and teamed up. Surprised by this sudden wave of energy, Karen was asked what she planned to do. Looking down with a deeply torn look, she struggled to make her choice. Finally shaking off her hesitation, Karen declared that she wanted to fight fair and square. Holding her weapon, her friend simply replied that she thought as much. Hearing Karen's strong statement, her friend praised her, noting that her honest attitude was exactly what made her so cool. As the knight stepped up to challenge Kazuya directly, dropping all fake behavior, she plainly declared that she could no longer afford to worry about how things looked, fiercely promising to take the secret of his incredible skill from him, one way or another. Staring him down, she boldly asked Kazuya if he thought their team attack was a dirty move. Completely unbothered by the growing army of older students stepping into the arena, Kazuya calmly replied, "Of course not." He boldly declared that the warm-up was finally over and things were just starting to get fun. As he excitedly jumped right back into the fight against the new wave of challengers, she fiercely met his charge, bitterly saying that he really had absolutely no charm. As the total number of enemies began to overwhelm him, Kazuya realized he wouldn't be able to block all of their attacks in time. Left with no other choice, he quickly thought back to Mao's strict warning not to do too much. However, pushing her advice aside, his eyes narrowed with strong focus as he firmly decided that it was finally time to get serious. Watching Kazuya recklessly fight the huge group of armored knights, Mao cried out in panic, calling him an idiot. Tightly holding his weapon as the crazy battle kept going, Kazuya watched his hit land, silently praying that the player wouldn't end up getting seriously hurt. Kazuya let out a heavy hit, his weapon crashing violently against an armored knight's shield. However, the moment the attack hit, he was suddenly caught off guard. As Kazuya's weapon slammed into the knight's shield, he was shocked to find that his shield break attack wouldn't work. Taking this perfect chance, Kageyama suddenly rushed in and hit him from behind, hurting Kazuya. As Kazuya quickly ran away to dodge the growing circle of enemies, the armored knights frantically called out to chase him down. Pumped up by the successful surprise attack, one of the fierce fighters rallied the group. Noting that their last hit actually did some damage, he confidently yelled for everyone to keep up the pressure, sure that with their sheer numbers they could finally overpower him. Shigeru immediately took advantage of the quick opening, coldly warning Kazuya that he was letting his guard down. Barely dodging the attack, Kazuya realized that while his body boost abilities were still working, he was completely blocked from using any of his actual weapon skills. Watching the tense fight from the sidelines, a girl silently wondered why Kazuya wasn't using any of his skills to fight back. Mao quickly realized the problem and explained the bad situation to her. Kazuya's weapon, the Sugiyama DX, was actually labeled as a staff. Because he hadn't leveled up his staff skill at all, he was completely blocked from using any of his special attacks. Looking at his stats, the hard truth finally hit Kazuya. He had completely forgotten how the game systems actually worked. Just as Sugiyama had warned, with his staff skill sitting at 0, physical weapon skills were completely off the table. Staring down the huge, approaching army of armored knights, Kazuya realized that his only remaining choice in this fight was magic. Faced with such giant odds and a huge disadvantage, he couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. Instead of panicking over his huge disadvantage, an excited, almost wild grin spread across Kazuya's face. Swinging his heavy staff, he boldly declared that things were finally getting fun, happily welcoming the thrill of being backed into a corner. Jumping high into the air for a huge hit, Kazuya excitedly declared that it was in desperate moments exactly like these where you truly get stronger. Crashing directly into the enemy lines and sending the armored knights flying, he showed a wide, excited grin, completely embracing the crazy fight. Diving right into the chaos, Kazuya easily broke apart the knights' team. He landed a brutal kick right to the face of one attacker and quickly pinned down Kageyama. Smoothly switching his focus in the middle of the fight, he swung his heavy staff to block a direct hit from Shigeru, leaving them both at their limit. Watching Kazuya fiercely hold his own against the huge odds, the intense scene left the entire arena shocked. As the dust settled, Kazuya stood completely tired among a sea of fallen knights. The remaining attackers were left in total disbelief. One frustrated knight cursed their failure to take him down. Beaten and breathing heavily, Kazuya fiercely stared ahead, relieved to finally realize that he had wiped out the last of the huge crowd. Bro really thought it was over. Kazuya looked up and realized with a tired laugh that Karen was the only enemy left standing. However, instead of raising her weapon to attack him, she stepped forward calmly and held out a potion, simply telling him to drink it. Kazuya realized it was a health potion. Karen urged him to drink it, explaining that it would heal any wound in a second. Her unexpected act of good sportsmanship immediately caused anger from her friend, who angrily yelled at her and demanded to know what she thought she was doing. Unbothered by the complaints, she calmly explained her actions, stating that there was absolutely no pride or point in fighting Kazuya while he was super weak. She fiercely declared that only by beating Kazuya at his absolute best could she truly claim the title of the strongest in the whole school. Back before the tournament started, Karen had spotted Mao and excitedly called her over, happy that she had come to watch the tournament. Mao had happily confirmed that she wouldn't miss it, adding that Karen's gear looked great on her. The compliment immediately made Karen beam as she smiled. Karen confessed to Mao that she had started to lose some of her confidence, wondering if she actually had any talent at all. When Mao replied that this didn't sound like her, Karen explained that ever since she met Kazuya, she had started to question if what she previously called hard work was really hard work at all. However, she admitted that it had also reminded her just how important it was to keep on trying. Mao warmly reassured her, confident that Karen would do the exact same thing. Suddenly realizing the time, Mao pointed out that the opening ceremony was about to start, sending Karen into a quick panic. Mao then offered her a healing potion. Back in the present, Kazuya quietly called out her name. Holding his staff tightly, Kazuya stubbornly insisted that he didn't need her potion to keep fighting. Karen simply stared back at him with fierce, strong focus. Accepting her strong choice, Kazuya drank the potion, warning Karen that she was going to regret her decision. Throwing the empty potion aside, his look sharpened into a fierce glare as he announced that he was now completely healed and ready to fight at his absolute best. Charging fiercely toward Kazuya, Karen shouted that she absolutely refused to lose. Meeting her intense energy head-on, Kazuya quickly got his staff ready to block her incoming hit. As their weapons violently hit, Kazuya met the heavy impact with a happy smile. Pushing back with everything she had, Karen fiercely ground her teeth, clearly struggling to hold her spot against his huge strength. As Karen successfully held up against the heavy impact and managed to hold her spot, Kazuya praised her impressive toughness, admitting that it would clearly take more than a single hit to beat her. Karen firmly answered that it would obviously take much more than that to take her down. Without missing a beat, Karen went on the attack, launching a heavy downward strike that Kazuya managed to dodge. The sheer power of their hit pushed them both back, but Karen wasted no time and immediately jumped right back in to keep the pressure on. Karen let out a fast storm of hits, forcing Kazuya to defend as he worked to block her non-stop attack. Taking a chance, Kazuya hit back with a massive, heavy swing of his club, but Karen firmly blocked the crushing blow. As the fierce battle between Kazuya and Karen went on in the background, Shigeru decided to use the quick distraction. Setting up his stance, he took aim and prepared to throw his spear directly at Kazuya. Stepping in before Shigeru could start his attack, Kageyama strictly warned him to stay completely out of the ongoing one-on-1 fight. Holding back his weapon, the two of them stood by and watched as Kazuya and Karen continued their fierce, fast fight in the background. Karen loudly told the viewers that absolutely no jumping in would be allowed. Locked in their heavy struggle, both Kazuya and Karen shared an intense, excited smile, completely lost in the pure fun of their one-on-1 fight. Kazuya let out a crushing blow with his club, completely breaking Karen's defense upon impact. Shocked by the huge force, Karen stared in a panic as she realized her shield had been completely destroyed, leaving her wide open as Kazuya immediately set up for another huge strike. Taking the full power of Kazuya's fierce hit, Karen was sent sliding backward across the ground. The sheer physical toll of the intense fight finally caught up to her, forcing her to drop down to one knee as she coughed and struggled to catch her breath. Admitting her impressive effort, Kazuya stated that he hadn't expected her to hold out for this long. Holding his weapon tightly, he darkly stated that it was time to end things before suddenly launching forward with a super fast hit. Despite being clearly tired, Karen stared back with strong focus as she prepared for the incoming attack. Bringing his massive club crashing down with huge power, Kazuya loudly declared game over as he delivered a final huge hit. As Kazuya got his massive club ready for the final swing, Karen stayed kneeling on the ground before him. Refusing to accept defeat, she frantically urged her tired body to move. Grinding her teeth with intense focus, she finally managed to plant her foot firmly on the ground, forcing herself back into action. Kazuya brought his massive club crashing down with huge power, completely breaking the ground where Karen had just been kneeling. However, as the dust began to settle from the huge impact, he was caught entirely off guard. To his total shock, Karen was nowhere to be seen. Realizing she had vanished from the spot, Kazuya quickly looked around, a sudden realization hitting him. Karen defied gravity with an incredible high jump, leaving the viewers completely shocked and shouting in disbelief at her impossible height as she put herself directly above Kazuya. Coming down from above with a powerful strike, Karen let out a heavy downward attack, but Kazuya reacted just in time, holding his club overhead with both hands to block the impact. Taking advantage of her speed, Karen immediately prepared to follow up with a quick close-up slash. Landing cleanly on her feet, Karen caught her breath while the viewers realized she must have unlocked a brand new skill to pull off that leap. Standing tall across from Kazuya once again, she prepared for the next part of their fight. Rather than being thrown off, Kazuya was genuinely excited, smiling in admiration as he realized Karen had actually grown stronger right in the middle of their fight, just like Sung Jin-woo. As Karen continued her aggressive attack, Kazuya was amazed by her mid-battle growth. Blocking her incoming blow, Kazuya noted that her hits had become significantly more powerful. As Karen pressed her attack, Kazuya easily stepped back, casually dodging her blade with exact movements as she repeatedly swung at him. Kazuya quickly realized the hidden catch to her sudden power boost. Karen hadn't even realized she had unlocked a new skill yet. What's worse, her energy was rapidly draining, as her tired body struggled to keep up with the huge strain of the ability. Wanting to bring out her full power, Kazuya jumped forward and delivered a sudden kick straight toward her, pushing her to her limits as he tested how much further she could go. Delivering a quick kick that sent her stumbling, Kazuya asked if that was really all she had left. Holding herself as she caught her breath, Karen whispered in frustration that she was sick and tired of hearing about the school's strongest. As the watching crowd whispered in confusion about what Kazuya was telling her, Kazuya looked down at her and coldly declared that her big sister isn't much either, leaving Karen wide-eyed with shock and fury at the sudden insult to her strength and pride. Kazuya pointed out that she had spent 3 whole years trying to get skills, mockingly concluding that this had to simply be the absolute best she could do. Sighing in disappointment, he brushed off her whole effort as a total waste of time. Angered by Kazuya's insults, Karen snapped and released a huge burst of power, breaking the ground beneath her and sending rocks flying into the air as she yelled out, warning Kazuya not to dare make fun of her sister. Watching her fill with strength, Kazuya ground his teeth in satisfaction, sure now that her real potential had finally woken up. Moving with unbelievable speed, Karen closed in on Kazuya, catching him completely off guard as he realized in shock that he wouldn't be able to dodge her hit in time. Screaming with intense anger, Karen let out a fast, full-power strike directly at Kazuya, but he managed to react just in time, bringing his club up to block the powerful hit head-on, though he was still sent flying. Kazuya admitted to himself that he would have been in serious trouble if he couldn't defend against an attack like that. Firmly holding his weapon, a sharp, excited grin spread across his face as he realized this fight had finally become a real match. Both pushed to their absolute limits, Karen screamed in focus as Kazuya yelled right back at her, both declaring that this battle was a match to decide who was truly stronger. With a huge collision of power, both of their strong attacks hit head-on, breaking the ground around them and kicking up a giant shockwave as neither side backed down. The power of the impact pushed Karen backward, leaving her frustrated as she thought about how no one had ever made her feel so helpless in battle. She admitted to herself that her current strength was still not enough. Panting and catching his breath after the brutal hit, Kazuya admitted to Karen that he took back what he had said earlier about her. Seeing her pure focus to win, he admitted her strength and respected the fight she put up. After admitting that she was strong like that one Sukuna scene, Kazuya calmly turned his back and walked away, declaring that the win was ultimately his. As Karen collapsed on the ground, the announcers and crowd reacted in sudden surprise, realizing the match had already come to an end. As the host officially declared Sado Kazuya the winner of this year's great competition, the crowd exploded into angry yelling, calling him a cheater, blaming him for ruining the tournament, and demanding that he never return to the school again. Unbothered by the anger, Kazuya casually looked at the crowd, whispering to himself that this reaction was pretty much what he had expected, concluding that he really just didn't like school. Sitting in the empty stands, Kejama noted that the match was over, while Naruko mentioned waking up only to find it was already finished. Looking around at the empty arena, they realized that the older students and the whole audience had already packed up and left. Crying with embarrassment, Mano shyly apologized, while Kejama casually asked how long he planned to keep his helmet on. Trying to reassure him, Kejama told Mano that he was actually pretty strong himself and should have more confidence, leaving him embarrassed as he thought to himself that the whole fight was surprisingly nice. Looking out over the empty arena, the three sitting together declared with quiet focus that they would become stronger, turning their eyes toward the sky thinking that they better lock in. Well guys, that's it for this recap. If y'all want a next part, just comment we want part 4. These videos take more effort than completing Kazuya's training to make, so if you want to support us, just sub to the channel and like the vid. Well then, peace out.